Welcome to the Marshall Pruett podcast and our Week in IndyCar series, and a rarity. I think it's only the second time I've done this in 3 years, and that is break out all of your awesome questions into an episode of its own. Why? Well, there is no way I could do this at the end of the normal show, which is my regular routine, and complete it in anything that would not fill up the hard drive on your phone or tablet or whatever it is that you happen to be listening through. At least as of now, 7:01 p.m. on a Tuesday night, the 20th of August, have 164 questions and or comments. And yeah, so lately I've been trying to do your Q&A in 60 minutes or less. For those who have listened during this trial, I have failed miserably, and I mean miserably, not even close, not 61 minutes, not 59, it's been 90 plus, I don't know. So I figure, you know what, I'm just going to break this out into a separate show and do as much as I can. What does I can mean? At some point in time, I'm going to run out of steam. And my brain's going to start laughing at me and saying, no, you're not going to get any more intelligence from me, pal. So I'm going to get as far as I can, but figure it'd be easier to do this in an episode of its own. And honestly, if this trend continues of lots and lots of questions, I might just keep doing things this way. So we have the primary episode, our featured guest, Santino Ferrucci. I really enjoyed that conversation with him. I hope you will either enjoy it, learn from it, whatever it is, whether you are a supporter of the kid or cast a very, very questioning eye in his direction. It'd be interesting to get your thoughts on that if you take a listen to that first. Just as I have said in every interview I have done with Santino for my podcast, which I think we've done 4 now. I think this is the 4th, maybe the 5th, including the long, half hour, 45 minutes of dedicated stuff we did last year, right around this time at Portland, when he was coming to the series soon after the Silverstone Formula 1, Formula 2 weekend, where he stepped all over body parts and really did not help himself in any way, including that of asking him to speak, declare, atone, whatever it might be. When we've had him on, most of the other times, folks have had similar questions. The ones we've gotten here are most of them being about looking back and reflecting, and also through one at him about being branded as a racist by some. And so anyways, appreciate that the kid will stand there and answer the questions. There are some in our IndyCar paddock who would not. Some who might hide behind a PR rep or look for excuses to end the interview early. I appreciate the fact that he's willing to, at 21 years old, frankly have the balls to take whatever it is. And last quick note, and I didn't mention this in the intro for the interview with him because, again, trying to make it a little more about the guests and not the background. I don't put these questions in front of my guests. I don't grab all your questions and send them to whomever and say, could you please approve these? Never do that. Never done that, as I forgot to put my phone on silent here. This isn't a very professional episode of the Marshall Pruett podcast, by the way. Michael Hull, Mr. Michael Hull, and I texting back and forth on a variety of topics, some of them related to Pocono. I don't put the questions in front of my guests to get their approval. I don't do that with anything. When it comes to stories I've written, I know that there are some journalists who do that. Hey, I sent this over to, get the thumbs up or thumbs down from the PR staff or the driver, the team owner, whomever it is. I would never think of doing that. Just as they don't ask me for my final approval on their setup changes or their hiring practices, I would never dream of giving control like that over to the person sitting across from me or on the other end of the phone. So just a little insight. The things that I put in front of Santino, he had no idea what they were, dealt with them as they were read. And so, yeah, as always, look forward to your feedback there. Corey Enders, who was the other guest from the Indy Pro 2000 series. Interesting kid. reminds me of maybe a musical Charlie Kimball a bit. I think we're going to have to infuse the kid with a little bit of funk, loosen him up a little bit. Lots of right brain, left brain, lots of duality there. Need to figure out exactly which side needs to pull in what direction, but interesting conversation with him as well. Last quick thing here on our Week in IndyCar Q&A special, brought to you by Cooper Tires, the Justice Brothers, TorontoMotorsports.com, and Bell Racing Helmets USA. A couple quick little house cleaning items. Going back just a little ways, I'd asked everyone to say, hey, I tend not to do on this podcast race recaps, thoughts, takeaways, and whatnot, because I let you, the listener, the question provider, drive the conversation on the show. Would you like me to maybe just include some of my own, knowing that it might take away from some of the questions that we get to later? And the overwhelming response was yes. So I'll get to that here at the open of Q&A. Secondly, I also asked some of you to help me with ideas on how to shorten the Q&As, or should I just be more cruel and trim things, only take the questions that I like, etc., etc. Got a lot of really good feedback. Realize I haven't responded to everybody on that feedback, to which I apologize, but the general note was, just go, man. Just do it. And if we don't want to listen to it all, we won't. But we'd rather you not try and come up with an artificial method of people can only ask one question, or just do it. If it's a half hour, an hour, two, whatever it is, just do it. And so as I am able to, with the somewhat limited free time that I still have, things are getting a little better there. Maybe an update here in the near future on how my wife's doing, but things are improving behind the scenes. Maybe more free time will come back and be my friend, and I can just sit down and say, look, we're going to rock and roll. Every question sent gets an answer. Not going to be there quite yet, because this would be a 4-hour podcast, and I truly still need to sleep after a busy 4 days in Monterey for the Rolex Monterey Motorsports reunion. Nonetheless, lots of good stuff here. Hopefully, all courtesy of you all for sending these items in. Going to get to those in just a moment. So this is now the second week, courtesy of TorontoMotorsports.com, where we are giving away one of 3, quote, prize packs. And as I do my best here, keeping in mind that this is going to be a shoddier episode where the production pacing probably suffers a little bit. I have not done my normal routine, though, of trying to cut and paste all your questions into one document to make it flow perfectly. I just honestly don't have the brain power to do that right now, so I'm just going to scroll through things and flow as best I can. But coming back to week 2, which, again, should hopefully be somewhat fun, we're going to do another giveaway, as desired here, with gifts from TorontoMotorsports.com, one of 3 prize packs. He says you can either pick a pack, as we use letter P a lot, pick a pack of MPP, Marshall Pruett Podcast t-shirt, James Hinchcliffe signature sunglasses, and a drink koozie, or second, a hamburger and french fry t-shirt and drink koozie, or 3 assorted stickers and a Marshall Pruett Podcast t-shirt. So one of the 3, and the method for giving that away is something rather simple and hopefully democratic, although it can be rigged, and that is choosing whomever's question got the most upvotes last week on the Marshall Pruett Podcast Facebook page. And yes, I've been doing this for a while now. It's still really weird to say my name over and over again in the title of things. So knowing that we're giving away one of those 3 options, and that we've already given away some to Mr. Hirsch, who was kind enough to contact us after the last episode and say, hey, you guys said I won. Tell me how to make it happen. So we connected Mr. Hirsch with TorontoMotorsports.com. Here in the second giveaway, the winner is Horatio Frey, whose question we heard from the fans about the hybrid systems. What are the engineers and teams saying? Which we posed to our man Craig Hampson, who, based on y'all's feedback, you want him back as often as possible, and I'm in full agreement. Love the guy. So Horatio, drop me a DM on Facebook or wherever, and I'll get you connected. Send me your email address, and I'll get you connected with our pal Derek Koska at TorontoMotorsports.com. And also, I'm in a giving mood, I guess. Jim Johnstone, the man who coined the acronym, shuffled some letters, took the newly announced Arrow McLaren SP amps and shuffled that. I would have never thought of this, Jim. Shuffled it into spam. SP Arrow McLaren, who's given me just the best acronym that makes me giggle every time I see it because I'm silly like that. Jim Johnstone, you came up with spam, and it wasn't a question. It just was you. You deserve one of those 3 options for a prize pack. So please send me your email address as well through DM, yada, 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 and we'll get you hooked up too. And if you want a little kind of secret here, we're going to give away one of the 3 prize pack options from TorontoMotorsports.com to whomever's question gets the most thumbs up, the most upvotes each week. But if you also send in stuff that's just really cool or makes me laugh, makes me giggle, is just brilliant, dumb, like spam, look, I'm going to want to give you things because, we make things. TorontoMotorsports.com, for real. They make all kinds of fun, awesome, not only IndyCar, I was about to call it IndyCar, not only IndyCar stuff, but a lot of really cool IndyCar stuff. And they do all my t-shirts and all the stickers and whatnot. And I don't get any money from it. I don't ask for any money from it. I just love that they make stuff available for those who might want it. So it just makes it easier for me to say, and you get free stuff, and you get free stuff. I'm like white male Oprah in that regard. Okay, we're done talking about giveaways and other stuff. Let's get into your questions, starting off with the little MP thoughts and takeaways from Pocono. And normally I would try and do the thing I said I was going to start doing. Straight up MP insights and whatnot. Frankly, your questions here really do help shape that conversation. So I'm going to go a little bit against what I said I would do. And instead of it just be solo my thoughts, I'm going to give you my thoughts, but honestly, pivoting off of your questions here. Who knows? Look, man, I just kind of make this stuff up. And if you're listening for the first time, I apologize. If you're a longtime listener, I guess I apologize too, but I've just beaten you into submission here. Let's go with Kyle Brown. This is among the many topics we're going to need to crack open and spend some time with. How can Sato's onboard camera make it look like he went straight when every other camera makes it look like he turned across Rossi? I thought I could always trust video. What do I believe when I can't trust my eyes? Seriously, Kyle, that is a perfectly framed opening question. And I'm going to roll in Mike DiCardo's question as well. Says, Marshall, please explain for the very few people trying to defend Sato why they are just wrong. So one thing I've done since the race is spend time on the telephone or by text communication, you name it. No email, just phone and text this time around. Speaking with my friends in the IndyCar paddock, would call them fellow race engineers. It's been a while since I've been a race engineer, but folks who knew me as a race engineer maybe once upon a time or something. Speaking with some folks that I know and that I trust, Kyle, even and like you, my brain was a little bit foggy for sure. Watching the crash as presented by NBC Sports, no doubt, drop the hammer. Takuma Sato, come and sit down for a race or two. Paul Tracy said he thought he should be benched for a race or two. And during the broadcast, could not argue with that. In complete agreement with PT there. We get some of the additional footage. All right. Takuma did some screen captures that he posted on social media to defend himself. I'm paraphrasing, but hey, I know you're blaming me. It wasn't me. And posted some screen captures of Alexander Rossi's onboard camera. He drew some pretty yellow dashed lines to show how Alexander had migrated across a seam to the right, and in no uncertain terms, it was implying it was Rossi's fault. And if you look at the seams and where they shifted from frame to frame, you could take from that yes, evidence that this was Alexander Rossi's fault. He drifted up into Sato. There's some other things too, where you go, okay, interesting yellow lines, interesting to see the seams used as a definitive data point. The one thing that might have taken away power from Takuma's argument by social media using imagery is if you can look at the yellow dotted lines and the seams, but if you just look at those, you might not be seeing the full picture, because if you look down, you'll look at the steering wheel and see that movement does not correlate the implied movement through the shifting seams is not matched with movement of the steering wheel. You don't see Rossi's steering wheel turn to the right, therefore lining up with the implication that he drifted right. I think there's one significant flaw here, Kyle, in the using the seams as an argument thing. To my knowledge, from what I've seen at Pocono with my own eyes, and to what I've seen on this video and others, I'd have a hard time saying the seams being used as a reference are straight as an arrow. They come out of one turn, aim all the way down to the next. They don't move left or right whatsoever. And I don't just mean of the accident site and the seams being used there, but pretty much anywhere on the track. Again, I'm sure there might be some examples of a perfectly straight seam, but by and large, I just seem to recall there being a little bit of migration, left or right, you name it, making the use of seams pretty hard to say that's my conclusive evidence. Having just recently watched it, I'm a few years late to the party. My wife and I watched the amazing FX series, The People versus O.J. Simpson, on the topic of evidence. Man, I don't think you could use the seams and yellow dotted lines and screen captures as evidence that would stand up in a court to try and hang this on Alexander Rossi. And that's not me taking Alexander's side. I'll just mention this. It doesn't mean anything, but maybe it helps. I used to be one of the most vocal and ardent critics of Takuma Sato. Have always liked him as a human being, but just thought his hapless Three Stooges way of bumbling through everything, hitting everything, if there was a bad decision to make in a field of 23, 25 drivers, who was going to make it? You know who it was, Takuma Sato. And his manager would send all kinds of things to my client saying, you need to fire this guy and get rid of him, and he's the worst, quote, blogger. That one pissed me off. Call me a blogger. We're going to have problems. But anyways, I really just did not care for Takuma Sato, the race car driver. And that has changed massively. I've always liked him as a person. I really like Takuma as a person even more. I mean, truly. Just, this is a little bit separate from professional reporter guy, blah, blah, blah. Just seeing him in the paddock, talking to him on pit lane, I look forward to it every time. The guy is just a delightful human being. I wrote a story earlier this year about, wow, it's been a while since the old, hapless Sato has been around. This guy's really turned the page late in his career. How rare is that? That never happens. I mean, this weekend he happened to be celebrating 10 years in IndyCar. Nonetheless, when things went down on Sunday, I, like everyone else watching the primary NBC footage, said, oh my, he's back. The same guy that plowed down half of his crew members not too long ago, he's back. The same guy that did this here, he's back. He's had a couple of things later in the season here that haven't been too complimentary. Regardless, looking at some of the after effects, if you want to put it that way. Interesting to see Takuma claim innocence, to then do some screen captures that don't necessarily make the argument, but nonetheless, that's his belief. Also quite interesting to see the Rahal Letterman Lanigan team today send out a press release claiming, again, this is their claim, I haven't seen it, so I'm having to take their words, that they reviewed the data and Takuma did nothing wrong. Didn't turn the steering wheel, didn't do anything. Okay. That's their belief, that's their statement. Here's I want to roll in something that I consider to be very interesting. I will preface up front, I cannot claim its accuracy. Just like the statements from the Rahal team. You know, it's not as if they look to me as an independent arbitrator, I should say. I would love it, though, as a guy who used to do a lot of IndyCar data engineering. Like, I could actually kind of get to the heart of it. But anyways, something started happening at Mid-Ohio. And I don't believe this has been written about. Maybe it has. Maybe it's been mentioned. I don't know. I can't keep track of what everybody does. But I do know that it really landed with me as a, ooh, whoa, that's really fascinating. And so this is the main thing I can bring to the conversation that I don't know if it's been brought up anywhere else. And that is at Mid-Ohio to some degree, but at Pocono, full bore, every team started receiving one another's data. Now, I don't mean full data, as in the proverbial 1,000 channels of information. What has happened, started to happen, and where this is, I just find this, it's really interesting. So wind the clock back a little bit to explain. When Verizon was the series sponsor, they had the Verizon app. One of the things they wanted to do that was unique for Verizon subscribers, of which I was not. You might have heard that story. I can tell it again if you need. Maybe a little bit funny. Costly, but funny. Come to find that in the car information, the live streaming data that was being made available exclusively on the Verizon app for a period was being captured and analyzed by one team, at least one team. I won't mention who. It really doesn't matter. If it did, I would. Doesn't matter. But one team. So on the Verizon app, there were 6 onboard data channels being streamed live. Steering, speed, wheel speed, gear number, engine RPM, throttle percentage, and braking. Not necessarily force, but basically an on-off type information delivery. That then made its way onto the broadcast. That's become something that we see somewhat regularly. Not sure, and this is just my own memory failing, not sure if we see all 6 data points on the broadcast, but definitely on the Verizon app, steering, speed, gear, RPM, throttle, and brake, those were all available to see from each car. Well, an enterprising team, as you would expect, if not others, said, we need to develop the software to capture this information that's coming to the app live, and boy, wouldn't that be amazing. So we can then benchmark our competitors. This is, I don't want to say nightmare, because if everybody's doing it, then everybody's, I guess, sharing in the nightmare, but at least at that point, there was apparently only one team that really went to the effort to say, okay, well, we're going to capture and keep this information, not just have it live and then disappear, never to be seen or replayed again. And all of a sudden, one team was able to know, hey, boy, we're our gearing might be different than another's, or, hey, steering input at this corner, this critical corner on one of our rivals who's beating us more or less. Speed could be up or down. Throttle, they're able to pick up the throttle here or there. Not saying that information taken from, say, car A, gleaned by Team B, is going to tell Team B, aha, we're going to lower the front springs 100 pounds. We're going to modify the toe to this, ride height to that, gear ratios here. Boom, we've matched or exceeded Team A because we could see all their information. But it does really, truly help an engineer and the performance engineers within the team to, in some way, even if it's informal, to quantify how the speed is being made by their direct competitors and maybe recognize improvements that the rivals have or deficiencies that they have on their own car. Well, then that migrated into it going to TV. Great. Bit of a surprise, I have learned, has come here recently where this information is being made available to the manufacturers, that being Chevy and Honda. From those that I've spoken with in the paddock, they really learned about this for the first time from their manufacturers. So I'm going to come back to the Sato angle here in just a moment, but this is really key. Starting at Pocono and during the race as well, as part of the live telemetry packets that come back from the cars that are being used, these 6 channels that are available to TV, well, this is all available to teams in a log file. Every team. So since every car is transmitting this information back, well, that means that if a team wants to go through the effort, and it does involve effort, it's not something that can just be pulled up instantly, I'm told, in the Cosworth data software, there is effort and expertise involved. But nonetheless, live telemetry during practice, qualifying, race, whatever it is, while it's being transmitted through live telemetry, each team can now, for the first time, access and capture all of this. And then if they want, after a session, after the race, through their own chosen means or method, I won't say decrypt, but basically use the information and take a look and get a good feeling for what all of their competitors are doing. There's only one little proviso here, based on what I'm told, that limits the true super granular quality of this. And it's that I'm told this information is being captured / sampled at 10 hertz. What does that mean? The amount of samples being taken from each of the 6 channels, it's not being captured at a crazy high rate. So if you were wanting to truly capture everything in the most, just the minutia of the minutia on all of these data traces, you'd certainly be going at a much higher sampling rate than 10 hertz. It would be 50, 100, 1,000, things that teams are choosing on their own onboard data systems and their own telemetry that comes straight to their timing stand. But at least for what the series is taking off the cars, sending to broadcast, but teams can now also grab themselves, it's at 10 hertz. What does that mean? It's going to give you, in some of those 6 forms of data, a picture of what's happening, but not the ability to drill in and say, aha, every fraction of a foot, we have an idea of how much the steering wheel is being turned, just down to the nth degree. But it'll certainly give you a portrait. From what I have been told by one engineer, I haven't spent the time to go and try and verify this with a second or third. I'm not writing about it. Just tell you that the person who told me, I know them. It's not a BS person. Said that at least in their review of the data coming off all the cars, and reviewing specifically what they saw on Sato's car, there's a belief that the steering wheel was turned to the left, therefore triggering this accident. So we have the team saying no. We have Takuma saying no and giving us a fun presentation. We have at least one voice using the new and honestly somewhat surprising, and to some that I spoke with, a little bit disturbing idea that other teams now have the ability, even though it's only at 10 hertz, to get a pretty good idea of what's happening and quantify, gear strategies, etc., etc. There's at least one person that I spoke with who was curious, who looked through the data, and their conclusion, not claiming its accuracy, just as not claiming the accuracy of any of the other statements, they believe that they saw something that said Sato turned the steering wheel left. I'll make two other quick points on this, coming back to the opening questions here from Kyle and Mike. I can't tell you whether Takuma Sato, quote, did it or didn't. I can tell you this. There's one driver that I spoke with who is very good on ovals and knows Pocono very well, who said, if you're looking at the real estate Sato was on, if you are running over the seam that he was on with his left rear tire, this driver has found that in this specific area where this took place, where Takuma positioned his car, that seam and the, I don't know if we should call it the transition, the grade to it, something about that seam, that running over it at that point, start to rotate the car. So if we think of, in some instances where maybe on a road or street course, well, I guess we've maybe even seen it on ovals, but driver will put a tire over a painted piece of track and lose grip all of a sudden. The car isn't at an angle where it should try and slide, but just touching this piece that is painted will cause the tire to lose traction. Drew a similar explanation of where this happened for Sato, wondering if he got his left rear on that seam in the wrong way, because it'll try and turn the car on you. That's why I avoid that area. So just a little bit of additional info here. Couple other quick things that I just want to raise. And these are things that, while they might not come to a definitive conclusion on who is at fault, I do think there's a couple items that I believe should have been amplified a lot more in takeaways. Obviously, with the cars being highly aerodynamic. Also, with the cars creating way too much drag, way too much turbulence behind them without the rear wheel pods. Also, another new thing for this race compared to last year's race at Pocono, a larger rear wing wicker. That wicker back there has only, although it's added downforce, it has certainly added more turbulence, as I've been told by those in the know. Creates a scenario where the drivers were mentioning, yeah, this is a track position race. You really have to go hard at the beginning or any restart to gain position, because it's just too hard to make that up in the natural flow, lap after lap after lap. Not saying it didn't or doesn't happen. We saw Will Power move forward at the end of the race, take the lead. But by and large, for those who aren't in optimal Will Power trim, there's a really strong need to push because of the Arrow spec really not making passings particularly easy or pleasant. Some of the armchair quarterbacking that I've seen have said, well, then everyone needs to step back, dial it back. Again, it's really easy stuff to say when you aren't a race car driver or an IndyCar driver. The reality is, these are people who go forward for a living and attack for a living. They are not tamed lions. that argument never works. So what we have is this fairly untenable situation with an Arrow package, no disrespect to our friends at the NTT IndyCar Series, would say the quote raciness at Indianapolis last year and at Pocono last year weren't superb. This year, Indy was better, maybe. Wasn't great by any means. I think some of you might remember I mentioned since I was at home instead of there, but actually home because of the things going on at home, I truly fell asleep at one point. It wasn't for long, but I just nodded off because there wasn't much going on, because the drivers, the supremely talented drivers, were not able to do anything because of Arrow. Not because of tires so much, not because of engines, but because of Arrow. It just looks like, once again, a proper grasp of what will allow passing to take place at Pocono and Indy, the other big super speedway. I'm not blaming IndyCar. I am certainly saying, though, that we have enough races, I think, in hand with this new 2018 Universal Aero Kit, even with some of the tweaks and modifications that have come down the line this year, to say they don't have a full grasp of what needs to be done to make passing happen. I hate to sound Californian, but more organically compared to something that takes crazy risk, and risk being the thing that often leads to big crashes, as we saw last weekend and the year before, or bad judgment. Not saying I want to see cartoonish Hanford device-like passes, but I just did not get much of a feeling that the drivers who wanted to go forward could, and those only in rare occasion were able to make serious passes through the field throughout the race. So what this leads to is the dynamic that everyone mentioned, that Ryan Hunter-Reay mentioned. I know we have a question about this. I'll just roll it in up here. Ryan was talking about the desperation needed, how you really had to go, and try some, high risk reward maneuvers, especially on the start and restarts, to gain positions, because you probably weren't going to get them otherwise. One of our listeners, Stephen Kilsdonk, thank you, Stephen, actually transcribed something from last week's guest, Craig Hampson, not from last week, though, but from about 10 months ago, on the topic of Pocono 2018. And I wanted to read that to you, because I think this does fill in a lot. It explains a lot. In theory, it should take away some of the who is at fault and who, what, and why. Not all of it. I'm going to come back to that to close. But here's what Craig said in our show. I think that the 2018 Pocono accident, and maybe some of the other ones that we see, is a product of the difficulty we have running close together, following, and making a pass. The cars are really affected by dirty air right now, particularly in super speedway form. And I think that what you're seeing out of the drivers is that they are very desperate to hold on to or gain positions on, in particular, the starts and restarts, because they say, look, if I lose a spot here, I'm never going to get it back under normal racing conditions. Or if I can gain some spots here, no one's ever going to pass me back. So the level of aggression on the start is way beyond what you would ever really want to see in a 500-mile race. That's Craig Hampson from October of 2018 saying this. It's as if he said this Sunday evening in reaction to the race that took place. This is something that, again, I apologize. When Steven transcribed this and posted it on Facebook, I shot him a note. I'm like, hey, where'd you get this? This is really good. And he politely kind of said, hey, idiot, it's from your own podcast last year. So I'd forgotten Craig had said these amazing things. Nonetheless, everything Craig said 10 months ago, it's eerily prophetic, but also based on what he saw at Pocono this last year. He then went on to say, and closed by saying, we preach patience. It's a 500-mile race. It's really long. But the drivers are saying, look, I have to gain 3 or 4 spots here or I'm never going to get them. So that's, to me, the biggest issue, is what we're seeing there. It says, I think we want to canonize the guys when we see these really crazy restarts. And they'll pass 5 guys and drive around the outside and split between cars. And it looks amazing, and the fans are really excited by that. But when that goes wrong, that's exactly the kind of situation that can cause an injury. So I think some of that is in the driver's hands, that they have to decide, hey, I don't think we should be taking those sort of risks. And that drives me to my conclusion here on this. Craig, as usual, spot on, race engineer for Sebastian Bourdais, if you didn't know, but super championship winning race engineer, one of the smartest, most sane guys you're going to find in the paddock. Here is somebody laying out the fact that, purely from an aerodynamic standpoint, on super speedways, since this new body kit came out, drivers cannot get away from one another. Drivers cannot, by and large, go forward. So if you're going to move forward in a race, which is what you're paid to do or paying to do, there are limited windows to make that happen in bulk, and that's at the start or restarts. It's aero limitations driving desperation. I'm a firm believer IndyCar should not go back to Pocono until they can figure out how to make this better. You might say, well, then why would you go to Indy? It's Indy. Come on. Okay. And if that sounds like a knee-jerk answer, maybe it is, but between the two, only one is elective. If Pocono fell off the calendar, while it would suck for those in and around the area who look forward to it, who love it, who attend it faithfully, Indy's not going to stop going to the Indy 500 because they've yet to figure out how to make passing really fun. Pocono, there's the danger component. And this is where I'm going to wind down here and start moving on to other things. Some folks have blamed the track. I'm not trying to be maudlin here, but let's be really clear and try and strip all the emotional responses from this conversation. The Pocono track was not responsible for the death of one of my absolute best friends in 2015. The track was not responsible for Robert Wickens colliding with Ryan Hunter-Reay, nor did it force a collision between Sato and a whole mess of angry drivers on Sunday. The track did not make those things happen. Men and decisions, specifically 2018 and now 2019. Men made decisions that led to those outcomes. What killed Justin was someone else's crash and an errant piece of bodywork hitting him in the head. That could have happened at any track. But if we're talking about what's happened here and scared the living poop out of all of us yet again, coming off of last year's race, this is decisions. Where the decisions are coming from, we know, and I think we should couch appropriately, a lot of this is driven by desperation. This is not just, hey, we could pass whenever we wanted, but we're just going to force the issue for fun on the opening lap, and oops, it didn't pan out. No. Takuma Sato did not, at any point in time, want to hit anybody, especially on the first lap. Nor did Rossi, Hunter-Reay, Felix Rosenquist, James Hinchcliffe, etc. Nobody wanted this to happen. Nobody intentionally did something to create this. There are 3 factors, though, that I think of Pocono coming out of 2018 as IndyCar's annual game of Russian roulette. One, I would say, significant contributor is the width of the track. So again, I'm not blaming the track. Just stating that there is something we need to recognize here. The track is very wide in many places. It allows a lot of creativity in passing that would not happen at other ovals that are narrower. Look, you're confined to a single lane, maybe 2 lanes. And if that outer lane is rubbered up, you can use it, but maybe not. So even though we could at Texas or some other place see cars fan out, 5 wide on the back straight heading to turn 3, you really don't see it because they know it's a relatively narrow funnel once they get to turn 3. Could do it 2 wide, not much more. Nonetheless, because of the width of Pocono, you tend to get more people going high and low on the runs between corners than you do at any other track. So there is something unique to Pocono with its width that does stand out. It is a contributor, but the width itself, again, these are men. And when we have women in the series, women, at least for this race, it's men. We have men choosing to go super wide in some cases, 3 wide in the accident we're referring to. Could have been 4 wide or more. That's one thing. There are more options here. Human nature is also a pretty big contributor here. This is coming back to the men part. Choices were made that created this situation. Answer a couple other questions here in this comment. There's some who have asked, well, the start of the race, oh my goodness, there were 9 wide. It's horrible. This had to be a contributor to the crash. It was 2 wide. Shouldn't they start this race single file? Somehow the width of the start and how many cars fan out is a contributor. No, not at all. We have not seen, by and large, many, if any, turn 1 crashes due to cars coming together. We tend to get them rolling out of turn 1 on the way to turn 2, or out of 2 on the way towards 3. We haven't really seen the, quote, start/restart and a big bundle of cars tangling, going into one and hitting the wall on any kind of routine basis. Just hasn't proven to be a thing that happens over and over and over again. So I don't see anything really happening there. What is interesting, though, if we're talking about the width and the freedom that some choose, human nature. Aha! I see big gaps, big wide open country. I'm going to take it. So here's something 2 final points. Because these cars are aerodynamic creatures, because drag is a serious limiting factor, getting a real serious hardcore draft it's vital to get by somebody, even on a start, even on a restart. So what you tend to see is, rather than a driver coming up on a car that they're intending to pass, swinging left or right and leaving half a car width, quarter of a car width, you tend to see the car stay much closer to get the maximum benefit of being inside the wake that the car they're trying to pass, that the hole they're penetrating in the air. You want to get as close as you can to use as much of that draft, the quote side draft, to motor on by. If we look at the crash, I'm not laying blame at Ryan Hunter-Reay, but man, you want to talk about damn near shooting sparks off of his right side wheels up against Alexander Rossi's left side wheels. I mean, there's almost no room between them. Certainly not enough room to not have to react if Rossi had actually turned the steering wheel left or right or whatever. There was no margin of error left. Even more on the right, Takuma Sato, you want to talk about razor thin margins. So I get it. I get that part of this, everything we come back to, what I believe, and race engineers, Craig Hampson as well, drivers are telling us, which I fully accept, the aero specification is one that is really, if you want to succeed, and you need to, You're in the championship fight. You're needing to perform for a sponsor. You're in a contract year, whatever it is. I can't fart around here. I got to go forward. And really, the only opportunities are when we're starting the race and restarting. I totally get that you're going to get really invested efforts to move by somebody. You also then need to use as much of the draft coming off the car you're trying to pass as possible. Could there have been an extra inch or two to the left or right given on Rossi? Hell yeah. I don't know why this hasn't been mentioned that much, if at all. Again, I don't know. But you want to talk about, this, it was as if on the left of Hunter-Reay and the right of Sato, there was some sort of wall that the three of them were driving through. And whatever the width of the three cars were together, there was maybe an extra inch on both sides of driving through that wall. And they had to get that close, otherwise they'd rip the wheels off the car. It was almost like the world's craziest stunt was trying to be performed to fit 3 Indy cars through something that was almost the exact width of 3 Indy cars. I get it. You need to use all that draft to get by. But that much on lap 1? I went back just informally and counted 14 seconds after Joseph Newgarden crossed the start-finish line. This crash took place. 14 seconds into a 500-mile race. It's asinine. These are decisions being made. We are going to cut this razor thin. Well, okay. Any little thing goes wrong, whether it was Sato turning the steering wheel, as one engineer believes, Sato not turning the steering wheel, as he and his team believes, the seam that Takuma was driving over that might have started to rotate his car, as in one of his competitors, highly credentialed competitors, believes. Whatever it is, I can tell you that beyond aerodynamics, proximity sure as hell played a factor in this crash. If you are going to huddle up that close to the guy you're passing, I'm not saying you got to leave yourself a huge margin of error, but when you leave yourself zero margin of error and something happens, turn the steering wheel, it was the seam rotating the car, whatever, this is what you get. So for some, however many of the people involved in the crash who are raising their hands saying, not me, I'm blameless. All right. If that's what you need to believe, cool. I just know that there were some decisions made that were not just hyper aggressive in getting by, but hyper aggressive in how you got by. Another component related to this, I had another race engineer point this out. Hey, so maybe someone moved and Rossi went over to the right, or Hunter-Reay turned the wheel a little bit and spooked Rossi, and Rossi moved. Something that had to do with the 2 cars to the left of Takuma somehow possibly coming into his, quote, lane, and that causing the contact of Takuma's left rear to Rossi's right front. I had one very smart engineer say, has anyone taken a look at the distance between Takuma and the wall on the right? He wasn't exactly being pinched. Boy, did he have plenty of room to continue moving to the right to clear Rossi. This just further comes back to the decisions standpoint, or point that I've made. Man, the one guy, the Rossi meat in the old Hunter-Reay and Sato sandwich, they decided they were going to huddle up as close as they could. There was a heck of a lot of room on both sides. I don't really believe Ryan was a factor in this. I'm just saying that if there was need for him to move left or Rossi to move left, it wasn't there. If Rossi by chance had turned the steering wheel a tiny bit to the left, we'd be talking about the Andretti Autosport teammates causing this massive pileup. Nonetheless, we have Sato, who is the one who made the contact with Rossi. Those two are the ones that came together that then triggered everything else. Being that close, while also having, 5 feet, 8 feet left to the right to the wall, whatever the number is, ample room. This is highly unnecessary. Final thing here, and this to me maybe is the final, my final quote verdict. And again, that means nothing. No one asked. I'm pretending someone gives a crap about what I think here. Did Takuma turn the steering wheel to the left? Who knows? Did the track do something? Who knows? Another person thought maybe the Arrow wake coming off of Dixon's car somehow pinned the nose of Sato's car and caused it to rotate. Again, I can't tell you what caused what. We have the no, we didn't do anything camp, and then we have the hell yes, you did camp. I don't have a foot in either one. I will tell you this, though. I've been through driver school, race car driver school. Spent about 2 years racing a Formula Ford, long time ago, on pennies, but wanted to do it, felt I needed to do it. It helped quite a bit, learning what would be my life's career, mechanic and otherwise. It helped a lot. It was really cool. So, day one of race car driver school, SCCA school, and the thing that I know that is taught everywhere, go-karting, you name it, all the way up to the highest levels. Formula One, NASCAR, IndyCar, IMSA. The phrasing changes a little bit, but it is a standard thing across every form of racing. It is the responsibility of the overtaking driver to execute a clean pass. Might be written with a few more words, a few less words, in different languages, but it's the same exact statement. It's a responsibility of the person doing the overtaking to overtake cleanly. And if they don't, that person is at fault. So my takeaway, leaving Pocono, knowing that the Chip Ganassi racing team just lost about $400,000 in destroyed equipment. Rosenquist's chassis was destroyed in the crash. You might have seen the front of the Dallara tub being shaved away on the fencing. Who knows what the rest of the costs are all totaled? Hunter-Reay, Hinch, Rossi, and Takuma's car as well. It's a lot. I'm guessing if we're not at $1 million total, if not more, it certainly should be close. It's a responsibility of the overtaking driver to execute a clean pass. Makes me forget video, screen captures, in-car. That's the thing that just struck me the most. Why is that not the central theme here? I know Takuma did not intend to do that. There's no way. I don't believe any crash he's ever had was through intent. Rossi, certainly, as the guy who had a bad restart, was not trying to get hit. The guy's trying to win a championship. Hunter-Reay, he's not going to win a championship. He's had a terrible year. Certainly trying to put a win on the board. Certainly trying to make things better. Regardless, I can say this with complete and total conviction, and I don't care what the data says. I don't care what video says. One guy was trying to go by another guy. Contact ensued. The overtake was not clean. Cars no longer competing for any meaningful position in the race. I will be surprised if IndyCar does not levy some sort of something. Is it a ban for one race? Is it two? I don't know. Is Takuma Sato truly at fault for all of this? I don't know. I do know that he tried to make a pass and did not complete it cleanly or without massive damage and risk to other people's health and certainly their pocketbooks. What would surprise me most of all, whether you think it was Sato, whether you think it was Rossi who truly did turn the steering, who knows? If we leave Pocono with no penalties, bans, something, there's nothing said, man, that's going to be a hard one to swallow and tolerate, I would say, IndyCar. You have got to get your drivers into the right frame of mind, even if they're dealing with massive aerodynamic limitations. 14 seconds into the race. Quarter of the field knocked out. Rossi's championship run probably over with, barring some miraculous close to the season. A lot of really unnecessary things happened here. All because, as quite a few drivers mentioned in some way, the lessons of 2018 lasted 14 seconds. If IndyCar does not do something to drop whatever proverbial hammer to make sure that drivers, we thought they would think twice this year, that they think 3 times next, 10 times next, something needs to be done or said. Some form of action needs to take place. Less about the individuals involved in Sunday's crash. More, if not completely, about setting a clear expectation for what will not be allowed to happen at future superspeedway events. And in the background, they have some serious work and thoughts that need to be expended on how to improve the aerodynamic side of the superspeedway specification so that drivers are not compelled to drive like Robert Wickens never got into the fence, and that they're completely impervious at a track that we know has hurt some people and or put some people at severe risk with fencing that, it's coming up here in another topic, does not make anyone feel super, super confident. So if we're not going back to Pocono, okay, that removes the need to send a grand statement on this specific event, what came out of it, but I still think there needs to be something from IndyCar to let it be known, okay, the consequences for such things in the future, it's not, oh, well, you took yourself out of the race, that's penalty enough. That's not a penalty. That's swallowing the whistle. All right, let's roll into some more questions here. I told you guys it was going to take a while to get through that. Let's go to Dean Ackerman. And also, I'm trying to think here. Mike Zastro. Dean says, last year took a lot of heat on Facebook and other forms of social media for asking why Pocono didn't double the height of their safer walls in the 3 corners of the, quote, tricky triangle. There are no grandstands or other viewing areas out in those locations to be blocked. And catch fences are industrial strength cheese graters for race cars, especially the open wheel variety. Repairing high strength steel cables with plastic zip ties or extra backyard gate fencing seems quite bush league as well as horrifying. The higher walls would seem to keep the cars inside the track boundaries and not tear them to shreds like the catch fencing portions of the walls. It was scary to see Sato upside down, but with a can opener effect of Rosenquist's car after he cleared the safer barrier wall, it was even more scary to witness. Mike Zastro follows with one that I God damn it. Start listening and acting. Mark says, in the conversation about alternatives to catch fencing, one existing ex-IndyCar facility that I don't see come up a lot as an example is Twin Ring Motegi. It replaced catch fencing in the middle of turns 3 and 4 with a tall wall flush to the back of the safer barrier, and he provided a photo of it. It says, do you know whether it was intended just for the ad space or if it was also designed to be strong enough to deflect airborne cars? It would seem the latter based on the design. Goes on to mention a few other things as well. Acknowledging cost is always an issue. Coming out of Pocono last year, looking at how the incident between Robbie and Ryan led to Robbie getting up in the air into the catch fencing, his car being shredded, what we believe was one of the seatbelt brackets pulling out of the tub, allowing him to sling forward, and all kinds of other bad things happen. Just the car, if not being mauled by the fencing, the forces themselves being put through Robbie's body, causing some safety stuff to fail. Believe. I've heard that from a lot of strong sources. Not saying it's a fact, though, just saying I've heard it. One way or the other, we know that he was hurt badly in ways that, and we've also seen images of him far forward in the cockpit in the crash that don't line up with everything working perfectly. But nonetheless, Robbie getting up into the catch fencing above the, call it, single row height safer barrier, brought up last year over and over again. I know I mentioned it, implored IndyCar, hey, just as Dean said, you have no fans sitting in the areas where these crashes happen on the outside. You can erect taller barriers without damaging the paying fan, without limiting anything. Do this. Work with the track. I know you don't own the track, but you choose to race there. Coming back to choices by men. Nothing. In Mark's example, and I've been to Motegi, I've only been there once, and I'm completely at fault for not thinking about this. I wish I had, and I'm so thankful you brought it up, Mark. If you go and look, and you, obviously this is radio, audio, pictures don't go so well on a podcast, but if you were to Google images of the Motegi Oval in Japan, you will see the high barriers that he's referring to that sit right behind the safer, that are giant, and they have big advertising along them. I mean, you would have to get a Robbie Gordon Stadium Super Truck jump and about a 500-foot run to launch over that wall. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I mean, there's no practical, conceivable way an IndyCar could go over one of those walls while racing around an oval. There's no fencing. There's no cables, as Dean refers to. There's nothing that can act as a cheese grater. It's just vertical wall. I will admit I don't know what it's made of, whether it is steel, whether it is, cement would be weird. But again, I can't tell you the construction method or materials, but it is tall and it appears to be very strong. How or why that hasn't become the norm at Pocono, I don't know. I truly don't know. But seeing Felix getting up into the fence again, he wasn't hurt, wasn't feeling great, was released ultimately and has been cleared to drive, but we did see his car get destroyed. It wasn't snapped in half. I get that. But nonetheless, the same steel cables cutting away at a vehicle that got up there. I don't honestly know. I can say that ovals are a massive part of IndyCar's tradition. They're the origins of IndyCar. It has remained a massive part of its tradition. I do not want them to ever go away. Some say they need to go away altogether. It's like saying the Super Bowl needs to go away. It's never going to happen. It shouldn't happen. So it's not even a topic. But as Dean races, as Mark has mentioned, if we're going to continue racing at big, high-speed, potentially lethal ovals, we're getting up into the fence because of the high speeds, and at Pocono in particular, the width, which gives the opportunity for big, long trajectories, right? Indy, while it's, quote, wide in some spaces, where crashes happen, where cars come together, in many instances, not all, there's not a lot of distance to travel before you hit the wall. James Hinchcliffe's crash, that was a bad example. That's something where a part failed and he had tons of speed and sailed, while not straight into the wall, almost straight. In most crashes that we see today, there's not a lot of distance between whether it's contact or a spin or something happens, there's not a huge amount of distance between the vehicle and the wall, meaning a lot of acceleration, a lot of momentum to build on the way to the wall. At least as we have seen at Pocono, tends to be, there's a lot of distance you can travel. You can gain a lot of speed sure hit that thing at a heck of an angle because you have width to create more angles that are going to be problematic at least. So coming back to Dean, coming back to Mark, I would say of the more important things IndyCar needs to think about, although it does not own the vast majority of the ovals that it chooses to race at, it needs to have a really serious conversation with itself about driver safety, the type of barriers that are encountered at the various ovals, and whether the series needs to demand or help implement improvements. Showing up if we go back to Pocono next year with no changes, and that's when you need to start talking about a boycott. That's where you need to start saying, if you don't take our safety as seriously as you should, then we're going to have to choose to not participate in this event. And it's not just Pocono, but it sure seems to be the place we have been talking about more than we want to, about concerning visits into catch fencing. Last thing on this topic, which is the one that beyond the driver safety, this is the thing that actually shocks me the most. Most racing series are super, super thin-skinned and crazy nervous about public impression. Any little instance of something looking wrong, not saying the right thing, not dressing the right way, presentation being off, just skittish, super, super nervous, very antsy about not looking correct, right, perfect from a corporate standpoint, just buttoned up, everything right. Last year we had Robbie get into the fence, and it was just memes nonstop about using, Home Depot fences, something you'd use to make a pig pen out of, or something to enclose the dog at night in the backyard. This kind of fencing being hauled out of I don't know where, and I don't think cable tied like plastic. There might have been some used to hold something in place while actual steel cabling or other forms of cabling was then used to attach it properly. But just the visuals of, what? You took the gate off the shed and stuffed it up there to fill the gaping hole caused by the crash? For a series like IndyCar that is very self-conscious, for them to see that last year, have drivers like my and our pal Mr. French Fry, Sebastian Bourdais, say, hell no. You think I'm going to go out and race with that out there? And then being kind of sort of strong-armed regardless. This is something that the world saw last year on television and said, you gotta be effing kidding me. Now, there was pushback from the track and the series. No, this is fine. We've signed off. Our safety people approved it. Great. Maybe everything was fine last year. And again this year when, I don't know, was it the same thing taken off the frickin' pig pen? Was it the same gate taken off the back that was used last year? I don't know, but the same exact thing happens. So not only did we have a year for some form of, oh, wow, that doesn't usually happen in NASCAR, but it sure just happened with IndyCar here. We ripped down a bunch of fence. What do we need to come up with? Some form of 10-foot, 20-foot, 30-foot wide patches, if you want to think of it like that. Like you think of Barabond. Hey, we just tore up some bodywork on the car. What do we have? Well, we've got some pre-cut Barabond, depending upon right front fender, right rear fender. We can lay it over, hold it in place, off we go as quickly as we can. We had a full year for Pocono and the series to say, "Ooh, boy, that was rough. What can we do better? What can we come up with? What if, God forbid, the same thing happened? We have to repair fence, take the race down, stop, red flag, repair the fence, get back going again." Well, let's think about that. Let's come up with some ideas. So if steel cabling is ripped down and there are the strong, tall poles that the cabling is connected to, what can we come up with that would allow us to not only put same exact material back in place, but do it quickly? We've seen it happen. How do we react and improve? Create some pre-fitted, pre-made 10, 20, 30 foot something that you can bolt to, attach to those vertical poles. It jumps right in place. Realize it's not just click, click, done, but boy, that sure seems like it would have been a pretty smart thing to consider. No, nothing. We're looking for the same damn Home Depot, Lowe's, wherever it was bought, fence taken from the backyard. So even if this was fully acceptable, IndyCar signed off on it, track signed off on it, even if every structural engineer in the world would say, Pruett, you're wrong. It's perfectly fine. Shut up. Okay, I'll take that. I'll accept that. You're right. I'm wrong. Everything perfectly sound. Remember the image-conscious, self-conscious side? That's the thing that blows me away. Where there was nothing clearly that was either said or enforced from the series side. Hey, you know, last year, little earmuff moment here, that was a shit show. That was a shit show inside of a dumpster fire. We have to do better. So even if every structural engineer in the world says the patchwork repair and using the Home Depot fence pieces was perfect, it looked like a shit show inside of a dumpster fire. It was embarrassing visually, period. End of statement. Everyone was in agreement with that last year. How the series, being as image conscious as it is, allows that to happen again in front of ABC Supply, Arrow Electronics, Penske Truck Leasing, PNC Bank, DHL, Motorsports, this, that, and the other, and Racing Team this, and Sponsor X. Run down all the names of the companies paying to be on IndyCars, to be on TV, those who were in attendance as guests of those teams, who are watching the same kind of shit they've got in their backyard being strung up and used to repair a fence. It's just unfathomable. So if we just pretend that structurally everything's perfect, The fact that they would let those visuals happen, that's the thing that I just cannot grasp. So it's a hollow statement, because usually every year Pocono recently has conflicted with an event I'm at here in Monterey, or here in the Bay Area at Laguna Seca, a vintage event that I've covered for the last 11 years. So that's why I haven't been to Pocono for a couple years. But if they go back and we have nothing coming from them talking about improvements in barrier design, safety improvements, if just improving the visuals, if for the third year in a row we have to repair torn down fencing, but hopefully some actual vertical walls like Motegi, if none of those things happen, and I'm free that weekend, I can't see myself going, because I can't be a part of that insanity. So this is a huge disappointment for me. I'll repeat it again. IndyCar doesn't own Pocono. IndyCar partners with Pocono. They choose to race there, etc., etc. There comes a point, though, where you say, you know what? We might not own it, but we sure have a choice as to whether we go back. And based on some really simple, practical data that's been generated, hey, 2 years in a row, cars have gotten into the fence. In one instance, a driver is still recovering from those injuries. In another, while the driver is okay, almost $500,000 was destroyed in his car alone going into the fence. You take the other ones who didn't get into the fence but crashed nonetheless. If IndyCar just turns up to Pocono again next year, same old, blase blah. Yeah, I'm at a loss. At a loss. A couple of the quick items here you've sent in on this. Kyle Brown says, how helpful are spotters on a trailer below the track surface in the infield at Pocono? That was raised by NBC, SN's broadcast team. I don't know. Again, it's a great idea, just not executed properly. Just a super quick side note. I didn't have a lot of super positive things to say about Paul Tracy's on-air performances last year. I really felt like, and this has nothing to do with the silly shit that he said to the person on Facebook, which he said. We can just forget the whole I didn't say it. He said it. We know it. There's no question. Deny it all you want. It's a fact. Regardless. I didn't think Paul's work last year was very strong. Independent of all that. Just was listening to it, and there just wasn't much there. This year, I mean, Townsend in particular last year, really, just from the color analyst standpoint. So separating whether it was Lee Diffie, Kevin Lee, anyone else hosting, leading the broadcast, but the true driver commentators. Townsend was the clear number one and was killing it. It's been really interesting, and I've been happy to see Paul this year. Whatever mojo he lost last year, it's come back, and he's been really strong this year. Not saying everything's been right. I'm texting Diffie throughout every broadcast going, you need to correct this little thing that PT just said that was wrong. But nonetheless, really sharp. I've been really impressed with how much he's picked up this year. So one of those things that he noted was how can folks standing on a trailer so far away from where the crash happened, for example, how can they be of any use as spotters when the angles are just wrong? That far away with binoculars, still, I mean, things start to converge. So I love the idea, Kyle, but how you do that without erecting a 30-foot tall something for folks to stand on, I have no idea. He also mentions the fence repair at Pocono looked unsophisticated. Yes. John Sable coming back to something earlier. Does Sato deserve a one-race ban? Again, man, I'd have a hard time saying Sato alone. I just think IndyCar needs to set some sort of standard that says on the super speedways and select other races if and when we choose, or maybe just if and when we choose. A driver or drivers have done something that is so clearly outside the realm of our expectations, we reserve the right to send a frickin' nasty message. And you might be the sacrificial lamb to get the message across. Something. They may already have it, but sometimes reiterating it, sometimes doing it just by itself, a message needs to be sent after Pocono that if anyone tries something like that again or causes something like that again, even if the video and whatever else is not conclusive, you better thank your sponsors in advance, because you're not going to be in a car representing them for a while. Let's go to Simon Roffey. He says, MP, you recently said the budget for a season for one car would be roughly $5 to $7 million. So looking back to the height of the kart and champ car period with all the tobacco money, what sort of budgets did teams have back then? Again, bit of a variable. I think the biggest deal I recall, Simon, was Newman Haas, I think, was something like 12 plus million a year. I could be wrong, totally wrong, but that's one of the numbers that I heard. Here's the thing, though. I don't think I've mentioned the team. I don't know. Sometimes I'm conflicted about whether I should mention the team or driver when I say I don't know if I should mention them, because while it's maybe fun to know the information, if I think it really would mean something, I guess maybe that's why I refrain from it sometimes, because not everybody wants their business put out. And even though technically I should just do it coldly because who cares, and I'm a reporter, and, you know, ultimately it's a small universe here and we do have to work with one another. I'm aware of one team that is receiving $11 million this year, that's a pretty impressive number, especially in kart era dollars. But yeah, I mean, not every team was spending a crazy amount. Keep in mind that we also had situations, Simon, in particular, where there might have been significant amount of tobacco money or whatever other money, beer money coming in. That money wasn't always needed to offset operating costs, because in many instances in the kart, not so much champ car period. I mean, champ car kind of came out of the embers of kart dying, but especially during the heyday of kart 90s, not so much early 2000s, but let's just say 90s. You had engine manufacturers, not with every team, but with a fair number of teams, spending a lot of money. So doing their own motors, spending all their own budgets there, plus whether it's picking up millions of dollars for a driver contract, putting millions into a team, if not more. I would say the biggest takeaway, Simon, maybe less than what an annual budget would be the profits. For many teams, not all, but for many teams, the 90s and having a proper manufacturer alignment plus a very good sponsor of beer, tobacco, or whatever. Boy, the opportunity to make money as a team owner really existed back then, I would say, in ways that do not today. Peter Peel, your question about RHR's comments about the cars not being able to pass one another, we got through that. Robbie Berggren says, Marshall, how have you rated race director Kyle Novak this year? I know that he had some areas to improve last year. Hashtag me personally. I'm quite happy with his fewer yellow flags are better mantra. Another weirdish thing here, Robbie. Kyle is the race director. He is the man atop the mountain. In his race control, though, in his race control structure, I don't believe it's one he created. I believe it's something that IndyCar created that he works within. He has judges. He has 2 race stewards in Max Pappas and Ari Leindyke. I might be forgetting a third. I apologize if so. But Kyle more or less has people to review the data and determine whether driver X gets penalized for the thing they did. That separates things a bit for me. So Kyle managing the flow of the race, I got to admit, I think, there's been a lot of times this year where you did not feel his presence, and that's what you were hoping for. You did not feel an overly managed race. So I'd say in that regard, fairly happy. This would be different than, say, Bo Barfield in IMSA. Kyle was, I don't want to say a protege, but worked under Bo. The way that Bo does his race control in IMSA is he is the one and only. And if that sounds like he's a control freak, I don't know. I don't receive it as such. I receive it as I need my data points. I need, whether it's a video, I need my people around me. I need a really good team to help provide me with information when I need additional information to make a determination. But if I'm going to be tasked with running this race, then I need to run all the race. I don't need to hand it off to other, you guys make the hard decisions over here on guilty or innocent. No. If I'm in charge, I'm in charge. And so this is no reflection on Kyle. And I don't believe Kyle has had a choice as to what kind of race control structure he has to work within. I know IndyCar president Jay Fry is up there at times, maybe all times, I'm not sure. So I can't tell you the number of people up there possibly voicing thoughts, opinions, or influencing things. I can tell you that at least with Bo's race control in IMSA, the one that he wanted in IndyCar, but ultimately was not given, and I believe led to his choice to leave, I like Bo's. Because you know what? If a dumb call is made, you can say, hey, Bo, what the hell was that? And, trust me, he and I have had many of those conversations. And he'll say, Pruett, you're a friggin' idiot. What are you talking about? You're completely wrong. You calling me out is wrong, because I'm right. Half the time, or whatever the percentage, he's completely correct. But I love the fact that the way IMSA structures their race control is one where there's one person. If you love it or you hate it, you know who to talk to. There's no, all right, well, how can we find out who voted yes or no on this penalty? Or not speaking anything ill of Max or Ari. They're both friends, people I respect outside of the racetrack. I'm just not a fan of a structure where the race director is not also the race controller. And when you have other people controlling aspects of the race and making decisions that aren't under the domain of the person calling the race, at least in my head, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So I don't know if that answered your question, Robbie, but yeah, I think at least for what Kyle's been tasked with, managing the flow of the race, administering the race compared to being judge and jury, there's not a lot that stands out to me that isn't positive. Chris Hoffman says, Marshall, what's the biggest insider info you've been told in years past that never happened, that's never been made public? Oh, there's been this team is selling to that team type stuff. I guess got to qualify this a little bit, Chris. Insider info doesn't necessarily mean accurate insider info. I've been told many things that were going to happen that never happened and were never made public because it never happened. Meaning, I don't think there was anything there to begin with. So that kind of falls in the baseless rumor department that I just tend to forget. I'll mention this. I know this is the week in IndyCar. And I also do a couple other shows. I cover sports car racing, GT, and prototype, couple different championships. Do vintage racing as well. I cannot say whether this is IndyCar, sports cars and GTs or prototypes or vintage. I can tell you I've been sitting on a piece of info that is going to happen. And by the time that news is revealed, I think 6 months will have transpired from when I first learned about it. And it's going to be massive. I will say this up front because I don't want 47 questions about it next week. It's not about an IndyCar engine manufacturer. I promise you, I swear on the life of my father, departed father and mother, it's not IndyCar's next engine manufacturer. But yeah, I don't really have a good answer to your question, Chris, because, you know, the things where I've been told, oh boy, this is going to happen, it's big. There's a pretty big sniff test that comes along with that. And also there's the person telling you that. You know, I've had some fans stop and tell me, oh, you know, I got a friend who's, you know, my uncle's brother, sister's cousin works for the truck driver of the person who delivers newspapers to this race team. And they heard, and you listen, you go, hey, thank you. You don't want to be dismissive, but I don't go and write that down as something to track. More often than not, when I hear about really big things that are going to happen and don't, they don't, and I don't think they're going to happen. So I apologize. I don't have a direct answer for you. I can tell you, though, that part of the deal is having trust, gaining trust from folks. And I think I know I'm not alone in this. I can't say what other reporters in the general realm of kind of North American non-NASCAR, I call it road racing, although IndyCar obviously has ovals, but kind of that heavy road racing base type stuff in IMSA, IndyCar, World Challenge and whatnot. I can't say for the other reporters and the trusts that they have and the embargoes that they're sitting on, but you know, if I assume that I am no different from anyone else and we all have similar levels of these things, you know, I'm sitting on and have been sitting on a couple of really serious things that I know are going to happen. I've been told they're going to happen by the people that will be doing them, or they will happen to. That's not abnormal. Couple things that I've heard that are going to be big things that are going to happen, Chris. 2 of them in IndyCar. I know where I need to ask the questions. I don't know what the big things are. So that's also maybe a normal part here of, I don't know, the news side, if any of you guys give a crap about this. I'm aware of 2 significant things that I believe are going to happen. Definitely believe they will. Just don't know what they are. So I need to ferret that part out, figure out what they are. But I do believe there's a couple other things that are brewing that are going to be very interesting. Maybe the final quick note on this is there's one hard part to this. I mean, look, there are people who are truly going to bed hungry tonight who have no roof over their head. That's hard. So this is all with a proverbial grain of salt, hard. There are times when you hear about things that you know are going to happen because the people that own the team or make the decisions tell you this is going to happen. And you know that folks that might be friends, old friends, whomever, going to be out of work. I know of 1 or 2 situations where there are people who will be losing their jobs. And that sucks. And I'd like to say, hey, pal, not telling you why, but if you were to start looking around now instead of at the end of the season, you might do that. I'll overshare here and say that there's been a situation or 2 where I've looked at it and said, okay, I haven't been told this under an embargo that I agreed to. Those you don't mess with. You stick to exactly what you agree to. Sometimes when I've heard and confirmed on background that, oh boy, this team's going to make a change, could be driver, could be mechanic, whatever. You hear that there's something coming down the pipeline and you know the person and you hold them in high regard. If I know that I'm not going to be upsetting anything, but actually saying, look, this is the thing most people would really appreciate to have if you could. Hey, man, just letting you know, that team over there is probably going to have some vacancies. And just suggesting, friend to friend, you'd be really smart to go over and inquire now instead of wait. That might be all you can share. Going up and saying, hey, man, you're getting fired. Can't really do that. It's not my place. But you certainly can, which I, between us listeners, do fairly often. Say, hey, hearing that there could be some changes over here, you might go talk to so-and-so. Do you need their number? I did that this week with a friend of mine, with two friends of mine, knowing that there's some changes coming, saying, hey, I don't know if you have these people's contact info. Here they are. Another one was an IndyCar driver last week who rang up and said, hey, there's some folks I'd like to talk to because I'm not exactly sure how things are going to pan out for me next year where I'm at. What do you think? What do you know? That's a pretty normal thing. I assume that happens across most reporters. And in that case, that person has 5 new, contacts with IndyCar team owners or managers needed for them to explore and get their 2020 sorted out. That kind of stuff, Chris, fairly normal. So I know I might have expanded this a little bit, a lot beyond your original question, but sometimes I find it interesting to learn the methods and procedures behind how people do things. And since there's like legitimately myself, Robin Miller, Bruce Martin, no longer Jim Aiello, David Malsher, there's about 4 of us left on the planet who are full-time IndyCar reporters. So, and if I'm forgetting someone else, I either apologize or I guess haven't really recognized what you do. So that's my own fault. But there aren't many of us left doing this, so I don't know, man. I figure share a little bit of the insider stuff if it is of any interest. Shay Small, how are you, Shay, from Down Under? Hey, MP, is Hinch and Rossi racing at Bathurst? Could that be a potential trial like Rossi did with Penske and IMSA for Hinch to go back to Andretti? Or is it just a case of the two mates having some fun in the off-season? I would have thought Michael would have put one of his other drivers in with Rossi. Yes, I know Hinch has driven a supercar before, but that was one of the previous generation cars that are different. Well, if we look at the odd assembly of houses here, Shay, we have James Hinchcliffe, who now, I realize the team name hasn't formally changed yet, but who now drives for Arrow McLaren SP, and the person who is the CEO of McLaren, Zach Brown, on a personal level, independent of McLaren, co-owns the the supercar team that these two will be driving for. So the Andretti United Walkinshaw Sport Auto, I don't know, Jim Johnstone, maybe I need another acronym for that one because I always forget the exact assembly and flow there. But Zach and Michael co-own that team. The fact that Michael has nominated his top IndyCar driver, and Zach, I'm assuming, has nominated what would be his current upcoming something or other top IndyCar driver, currently on the payroll to go do this. That's at least how I have interpreted it. Here's just another little quick observance. I always find it really interesting with things like this, and this is not criticizing you at all, Shay. It's just me like going, why am I don't think like that. So it's fascinating to see others get a lot of things like this, where I think there's a question somewhere here this week, and we've had it in the last week as well. Is McLaren signing on with SP an entree to McLaren possibly becoming an engine manufacturer in IndyCar? This as well is one, is this Andretti United Walkinshaw collaboration coming up here and Hinch being involved, some sort of way for Andretti to, kind of test and get a feel for him. My brain never strays in those directions, because if, for example, McLaren wanted to provide engines in IndyCar, they would provide engines in IndyCar. There's no need to sponsor a team and partner with an American and a Canadian to now have three entities equally represented in a team to then be the kind of baby steps to then eventually make engines possible. If they wanted to supply engines, they'd supply engines. They don't need to do anything with the team. Here, if Andretti wanted Hinch back, they would speak to SP and M, or just dial 1-800-SPAM and say, hey, we'd like to hire this guy. Can we have him? He's a Honda guy. We're Honda people. We know him. We see him race. We race against him every week. He's driven for us. He won 3 races for us in 2013. We'd like him. The thought of Andretti trying to get a feel for him in a modern era supercar in Australia would be one of the strangest decisions ever made. Because if they wanted to get a feel for where James Hinchcliffe was at today, it's certainly not going to be at a track James has never raced on, in a car he's never raced on, with a teammate who's never raced one of these cars. That would be a scenario where every possible form of failure and lack of direct equation to IndyCar would be created. So, yeah, I'd just say that this is nothing other than Michael and Zach saying, well, hey, we're partners. Let's get our top IndyCar guys. IndyCar is still really popular down under, and go do some fun stuff at Bathurst. And if Michael does have an interest by chance in James driving for him, and James wanted to drive for him again, that'd be a really simple and straight conversation that, assuming Zach and Sam Schmidt and Rick Peterson were in agreement, they could give their collective thumbs up to. Okay, we're going to go to Jameen Tuttle. Jameen says, I worked for years at a couple of dirt tracks in Indiana. I was at Twin Cities when Jack Hewitt was hurt in a somewhat routine flip. I once saw a little front-wheel drive car only running about 40 miles an hour, break an axle at the exact worst moment in a corner, and flip like a sprint car. Heck, I saw a car land on the table going into pit entrance at Lawrenceburg after going through the fence, and anyone who's ever been caught unawares by a dirt clod on a Saturday night knows that even that will send you looking for Band-Aids and ice packs. It says, I'm not making light or unconcerned. It was hard to sit through that mess at Pocono, but racing is dangerous, and we should do what we can to make it safe. But all the issues have been accidents. Yes, terrible, but accidents nonetheless. Is IndyCar losing touch with its roots? How do you feel about it? Mention here that although I ask for your questions each week, and I should do more of it, ask for things like this from Jameen, which is more his thoughts. I realize he posed a question to me at the end, but look, I live in this stuff every day. I'm fully aware of what I think and how I think about everything. My friends in the series, drivers, engineers, Miller, I love hearing from you guys, genuinely. So whether it's a question from Shay, wondering if there's an odd angle maybe to this Hinch and Rossi thing, or could it be straight up, or Jameen's here, seriously love this stuff. So please do not hesitate to ask less of a question, but more speak your piece. Jameen, this is what I believe with absolute conviction. You are 100% correct. You are as factual as can be. Racing is dangerous, has not changed. It has becomes safer for sure, but danger is still ever present. We all know that Sunday's accident could have resulted in death. Racing is very unique in that standpoint. We know that in all but the rarest situations, you go and attend just about any other form of the sport. Anything involving a ball or a stick or something, throwing a ball, hitting a ball, bouncing a ball, kicking a ball, you do not go and attend or turn on the TV and watch with 1% expectation that a fatality will take place among the players. And I know in our world they're called drivers. I'll just call them players for now. There's zero expectation Steph Curry is going to die during an NBA game. Tom Brady is going to die as a result of a hit, or whomever does something and dies in baseball. I don't want to get too far into this. It's not the point, but obviously we've seen some fans get killed with baseballs and not enough netting. But regardless, if we're just talking about turning on to watch a sport, I mean, MMA doesn't really happen. I know that 2 boxers just died. Boxing has really been the only non-racing sport of late that comes to mind immediately, where some sort of collision, some sort of violence in the game, even a freak accident, can result in death or serious maiming, dismemberment, paralysis, quadriplegia. That's it. So in racing, we have this little world that we know that is unlike more or less any other sport in the world, where death, popular sport, televised sport, highly attended sport, where this is a reality and a possibility on every lap at every event. What's weird, Jameen, is we collectively as human beings, doesn't mean everybody, just saying the vast percentage, as I have seen in recent years, can't give you an exact point where it started, but we as a people have lost our stomach for such things. I'm not saying we should have ever had a stomach for such things, but where your point, which is spot on, man, racing's dangerous. Shit happens. I've had a driver die on me. I was just talking about it last weekend with my old boss, Bob Lesnett at Fife Ridge Racing. He had a heart attack and died. It wasn't a crash, but, you know, had it. My very first day as a professional race car mechanic, like working for a real pro racing team, my driver died on me. Pulled out of pit lane, the start of practice, never came back. Never saw him again. Wasn't a crash, was a fatality nonetheless. Have been at tracks where the old early days of the IRL, the Indy Racing League, Charlotte, I believe, is one. I'm forgetting the other track. I apologize. But, you know, being an engineer, sitting on the timing stand, looking out onto the front straight quite often because you can't see much else, watching a crash and a wheel and tire go flying into the stands and kill. I don't remember, was it 7 people, 2 people, 3 people? I apologize again. My memory's failing, but having watched that happen, it's far enough away where I didn't see any gore. I mean, again, it just, but could see this crazy thing happen. Race stopped. I mean, brutal. I've mentioned this before. I'm just giving you the quick rundown of personal experiences. None of this is meant to be, I know more than you, or oh, woe is me. None of that. Just sharing. My last year working in IndyCar on the team side as an assistant engineer was 2001 with Sam Schmidt Motorsports, and was there at Texas and part of the team when Jarrett Schroeder blew an engine between turn 1 and 2. Our man Davey Hamilton came through, next car behind, got on that oil and water, went right up the track, over the barrier into the fence on the vertical pole, which was exposed, broke the front half of the tub off at more or less his knees. No, a little bit further forward than his knees, but not too far. I've got photos of it. I've never posted it. The car itself, the aftermath. I don't know why I took it. And it wasn't that night. It was maybe a couple weeks later. I think we were at Gateway testing, and I had to go upstairs to get something, and the car was still there. I'm like, I just need to take photos of this to document it so people know how much damage can be done. And I mean, I'm never been afraid of blood. When the car was returned to us by the wrecking crew, I don't remember exactly who or how, but basically volunteers were asked for to clean up the car before it could be put away. And that's because Davy's lower extremities were smashed and battered and arteries open and you name it. And there was all kinds of blood inside the car. And then them lifting him out and pulling him across the side pod. The whole top of the right side pod was just, it looked like someone opened up a big can of tomato juice and just poured the whole thing out over the top of the side pod. And so, again, this is nothing to do with me, just like, hey, I'll do it. I'll help do it. I don't remember my other teammate who helped me, but there was two of us, and we were just in the mindset of, like, yeah, this is the worst scenario possible. We love Davey. Let's just get this cleaned up so we can put it away and get out of here. And so mopping up with paper towels and you name it, mopping the blood up off of Davy's blood up off of the car. I mean, it's a surreal thing to see. Then you realize, what does the AMR safety team or the whole Matro safety team, go back all the different years with the different names? The Dr. Olvies, the Dr. Trammels, the Dr. Box, the honor, if I will never forget the 5 minutes I spent mopping up and cleaning up dried blood and wet blood on a side pod, what are these guys, men and women, what's going through their minds with all the mangled, grotesque stuff they've seen in blood? So anyways, I just come back to this, Jameen, because I just don't think we as a people have a stomach for this anymore. Between concussions in the NFL and that turning off a lot of people to the thought of drivers getting seriously injured, just the fact of it being an accepted thing, part of the sport. It's what happens. You sign up and you look, you're here willingly. No one's forcing you to be here. Everything you've mentioned, which is 100% correct, in so many ways today is no longer accepted or tolerated. And I just think that is a societal change. It just seems to be something that even within me, seeing the crash, fearing what has happened at Pocono recently, seeing it happen again, much, quote, better outcome than last year. But even in me, there's this clenching of butt cheeks and teeth and fists. Maybe I'm getting softer as I get older. I know my man Miller, who does have a very big heart. That's a little secret he doesn't like folks to know. But he has seen enough of this and has become so worn to it. I was going to say jaded. That would have been the wrong word. Just so acclimated to death. Just right away, coming up in racing in the 60s. Funeral after funeral after funeral after funeral. It's not as if this stuff doesn't impact him now, but it doesn't shake him. And it hasn't shaken him for a long time. I don't know. I think I might be made from weaker stuff, because it still really affects me. It's never not affected me. I have, though, Jameen, always had that recognition that it is dangerous. And these things can happen. Maybe the thing that shifted within me is less of an acceptance of the anything other than random. I mentioned towards the outset of the big man, of Justin being killed. So we're, 4 days? Again, I'm recording this Tuesday night. I know I'm not going to get all this finished. I'm going to have to continue in the morning, so it'll be the 21st maybe when I wrap up and when this is posted. But I mourn Justin's loss hard. And we're coming up on the 4th anniversary. I don't think about him every day. That'd be a lie. Sometimes a week or two might go by without me thinking about Justin. I've yet, and this is 4 years later for me, who was a friend. Imagine Julia, Stefan, the babies, Jane and Jess. I mean, I'm not related by blood or marriage. Just a friend, and he had better friends for sure, or those that knew him longer, whatever. Even so, even with all those caveats, knowing where I rank at the frickin' bottom of his mother and father and just so many people. The mower, Chris Mower, his amazing wife. And his loss to me through a freak accident. I'm not even at that place 4 years later where I can have conversations with fellow close friends and lovers of Justin Wilson. Like a Dario Franchitti, AJ Allmendinger, Mike Shanks, another one that comes to mind. There's so many. I'm not even at a place 4 years later, Jameen, where I can have the reverie conversations with them about just, you remember that time when you did, that silly SOB. Oh, you remember? I'm not even close, and we're 4 frickin' years out. And I think maybe this comes back to an inner weakness or over emotional something within me. There's a part of me that hates the lack of necessity behind this. And maybe this is somewhere in the answer to your question as to why this racing's dangerous. Why can't people just accept the fact that this accidents, injury, pain, and death is part of the sport we choose to love? Why can't folks continue to embrace that? I think it's the lack of willingness to accept death and suffering when there's no conceivable reason why it should take place in so many of these incidents. There's no reason for that nose that came off of Sage Karam's car. There's no reason for it to come off the car. They tether everything else, wheels and suspension and blah, blah, blah. Afterwards, adjustment was made, noses tethered. To my knowledge, we haven't seen any noses go flying off in a crash since. Okay, we learned from it. Cost Justin Wilson his life to think to do that. It had been done in other parts of the car coming out of I believe it was the Charlotte crash in 97. Might have been 98. I apologize. But that crash, I believe, was the catalyst for the SWEMs, the tethering system to start to filter into IndyCar. I remember those things showing up for the first time going, whoa, wow, these look a little crude, but if they work, then awesome. Why not? Why not the thing that meets the wall first? I don't know. Pisses me off, though, that we collectively didn't think to tether that thing back then. Big man would be here helping his girls to go off to school right now. Robbie's accident. I mean, there's no front wheel guard, rear wheel guard that was going to stop that car from getting up to where it went. But the fact that we go back, and no, we're not talking a fatality here, but the fact that we're going back, Jameen, the following year, all the stuff that I mentioned earlier, nothing changed, nothing learned, nothing applied. It's those things that frustrate me, man. And so maybe that's the thing that tempers. Maybe that's the thing where you suffer enough loss or you refuse to accept the things you once did. Hey, it's dangerous. These things happen. You know, shit happens. True. Man, I don't know. I don't know if we can continue to hold that viewpoint, though, Jameen. I think knowing that we as a species are very problem-solvy, hey, let's come up with ideas about how to make things better. If people are broke, how do we provide jobs? If people are hungry, how do we provide food? If people are getting injured in an activity caused by a poor design, how do we improve that design? So I think maybe the lack of acceptance here, global acceptance, Jameen, could be the fact that we sure do seem to try and solve a lot of problems. Every day there's some new product being sold that makes something a little bit better. Some minor inconvenience, even smaller. There's no end to all the things that people come up with, all trying to improve life or happiness. And so I think the throwing your hands up and saying racing's dangerous, stuff happens. True. Very true. But if we aren't drilling into the areas we could make things better, improve the odds, yeah, maybe that's the more centrist view I'm taking now, instead of being all the way on one end, oh my God, stop, to, meh, it happens. Simon Rossi, again, really good question. Thank you, Simon. How long do you think ABC Supply will continue to sponsor the Foyts with their ongoing dire performances? Surely there are other teams that would give them much better exposure. ABC Meyershank Racing has a ring to it. Weird thing here, Simon. On merit alone, ABC should have left the Foyt team years ago, long before I started this little podcast, for us to debate this question. On results alone, what, they have one win? Is that, it was Sato's 2013 win at Long Beach? Is that the only win with ABC Supply in place? I could be wrong. There could be, something that I'm just totally forgetting, and I apologize if so. But if I am wrong, we're still only talking about, 2 or 3? I don't know what the exact number is. It's not a lot. So if we're just talking merit-based, we're going to give you money to go out and run in quality positions on track, which would then garner attention from television cameras and help us to sell our products and raise awareness for our business, our quality, our everything. It's been a complete failure, without a doubt, just on the numbers alone. If you look at the number of races entered and the number of podiums and or wins that have been returned, I have not done the math. I don't need to do the math. It's not good. So that tells us one thing. ABC's support of the Foyt team is not and has not been based on results. That's amazing. That's kind of a dream, isn't it? I mean, this is it applies to both genders. This is the male supermodel choosing to stay with the decidedly average, if not very visually pleasing female, and just not even recognizing that there's no appeal whatsoever visually, but got a heart of gold, or vice versa. This is the absolute supermodel of a woman choosing the ugliest man. Supermodel man choosing the ugliest of woman and saying, heart of gold, love everything that you are about, even if on the outside there's just nothing there. If you've seen my wife, photos of my wife, and seen me, I might be speaking from experience. That's amazing, Simon. It truly is. That's why whenever I get a chance, I think Robin gets a chance, most people get a chance, we say and heap nothing but praise. ABC Supply, you are amazing. You have remained committed to a team that, in terms of competitive justification, hasn't returned very much. But what I know is they love AJ Foyt, and they love Larry Foyt, and they love Ann Fornoro, the team's longtime public relations head. She's amazing. They love Tony Kanaan. I don't know if they love Matthias Lace. It's hard not to love the kid. I assume they do. They have loved the people that have come before them in the cockpit. It seems like the value that ABC is good with receiving is based on business to business, inner relations, right? Hey, Tony's going to show up at this trade show and talk about this thing and going to enthrall 500 people. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. It appears, Simon, they have found many, many things that have nothing to do with passing Joseph Newgarden for the win on Sunday at wherever motor racing circuit. That's kind of a dream. They're now the longest tenured sponsor in the series after Target left, I believe. So full credit to them. What I wonder, though, is will this last forever? If the how you do on track doesn't really matter is a permanent fixture of the relationship, well, that's amazing. You can save a lot of money. You can hire some very bad engineers. Truly, you could just go and get rookies straight out of the old Skip Barber School or wherever else. We're going to the Chump Car race, or I think they, whatever they call themselves now. We're going to the 24 Hours of Lemons and getting ourselves a racing team. I mean, if the sponsor doesn't care, save a lot of money. I'm not saying ABC doesn't care. I believe they do. I just believe that they are incredibly faithful people who love them some Foyts and some Tony Kanaan, so on and so forth. And in the absence of on-track performance, the team and ABC are doing all they can to amplify other areas of the relationship to give return on investment. What I can't say is whether that's just going to last forever. And based on the hiring of Scott Harner earlier this year and what I would expect to be some changes for next year, maybe one driver, I would assume some engineers, I expect there to be some changes made next year, all to improve performance, and you don't do that if there isn't pressure to do so. So amazing, Simon, that ABC has been so steadfast in supporting the team. But at some point in time, you have to believe they're going to say, all right, man, if we aren't looking at a top 12 in the championship this year, with a couple of podiums and a couple of some things, we're going to have to part ways. I mean, right now, Tony Kanaan is 18th in the championship. Matthias Lace is 19th in the championship. And while there are often 22, 3, 4 cars in the field, the most damning piece of information is this. Tony Kanaan, Matthias Lace are teammates at AJ Foyt Racing. They are 18th and 19th in the championship, which happens to be the two lowest positions for drivers who have competed in every race, meaning the only drivers behind them are part-time drivers. Ed Jones, again, it's fact. Ed Jones, who only does road and street courses in Ed Carpenter's entry. I realize that Ed also competed at Indy. There's a one-off there with the team. But good old Special Ed Jones is their road and street course guy. He has missed Texas, Iowa, and Pocono last weekend. He's currently only 12 points behind Mateus. Tony's a little bit further up the road in terms of points. I had a run to 8th place last weekend, which was, again, really good for them. That 9th at Indianapolis, also really good. Had a 10th at Iowa. What's it telling us? Well, a team that's always been good on ovals, Tony, who we know is a frickin' master of ovals, they have delivered 8th, 9th, and 10th place finishes as their supreme highlights of the year. There's only those 3 highlights. I'm looking at it right now. The rest, 15th, 12th, 18th, 19th, 20th, 15th, 22nd, 16th, 21st, 17th, 20th. Mateus, it's even worse. I know he had a 4th on the IMS road course, which is awesome. Truly, I love the kid. But the team's a disaster. It has been a disaster. They've been the worst in the series for many years now. I part of me wonders if ABC Supply, maybe this happened, maybe I don't know about it, but if ABC Supply had come to them 3 years ago and said, we're going to pay you based on results. So here's an annual budget. I'm just going to make up a number. Let's say we're going to pay $6 million for the number 14 entry. If they had worked a contract like we hear about in the NFL sometimes, incentive-based, if you have X amount of sacks, if you have X amount of yards, X amount of this, X amount of that, you get voted into this, and this happens. Here's all these different tiers for all the money that we have, the maximum we've promised we'll give you. Here's all the ways to get pieces of that money. But what we're not doing is writing you a check for the whole thing up front, or even at the end. If ABC Supply had said, we're going to commit up to $6 million to you, we will pay it out in fractions, in 1/16th or 1/17th fractions, depending on however many races there have been each year. We're going to pay that out after every race, based on your finishing position. Of course, sometimes there are going to be crashes where it's out of your control, not your fault. That happens to everybody. So we're going to weight things a little bit. So if you finish the race, you're going to get a little bit of extra helping, but only if you're in the top 10. If you are 11th or worse, you're going to get a smaller amount. And if it's a crash and you cause the crash, you get nothing. There's a part of me that wonders, and I realize we're talking about the question Simon's raised about the Foyt team. This could be raised about some others who have not covered themselves in glory. I mean, I worked for, I've had a client that considered going to this model, which was traffic-based. Hey, we're going to pay you based on how many eyeballs you put on your work. Therefore, we have now placed the pressure on you to not just write the thing you want, that, hey, oh, fun, I'm going to tell the history of some obscure thing that 6 people are going to care about. Yeah, great. You can do that. Just know you're not really getting paid for it. We want traffic. We want success. We want to win. So we're going to shift how you get paid to how much traffic you generate. They ultimately chose not to. I don't know how to say this without sounding like a complete egotistical a-hole. I wasn't too concerned about it. I'm pretty confident, based on track record, that I can generate eyeballs on work. But nonetheless, for those who really needed that money and a lot of it, it could have been a really bad thing. But it's an interesting thing to think about. Hey, so merit-based pay? Are we going to commit $6 million to you, just like every other team asks from their primary sponsors, with no mechanism or recourse if you suck? If you give us almost nothing in return for it? Be interesting. If we're looking at, a Foyt in this example or any other teams, and there have been plenty. The Panther comes to mind as well. Boy, did they take a lot of money in and not necessarily give back a whole bunch. That's well known. Regardless, man, the idea of we're going to commit up to $6 million to you. It's going to be paid out in 16 or 17 slices, however many races it is. You're going to be paid in post-race installments. And here's the criteria of how you get paid. Finish in the top 3, you're going to get this maximum amount of that 1/16th, 17th slice. A win would actually bring a bonus. We're going to tap into a totally separate fund beyond the 6 we've committed. If you finish anywhere from 6th to 10th, okay, who knows? I'm just pulling out of my ass here. 70% of maximum. 10th to 15th, 40% of maximum. 15th or lower, 20%. Crash involved with any of that outside? Well, the top 15, 0%. Man, sure would be hard to go a couple races with a couple of bad finishes like that. And granted, if we're talking about this has been the Ryan Hunter-Reay year where truly the cartoon anvil falls on you way too often, there might be some mitigating circumstances to explore with the sponsor. But yeah, now we know why teams do not enter into contracts like that, especially the ones that have struggled like Foyt for so many years. Amen to ABC. You guys rock. Truly rock. I look forward to the time. I'm hoping next year. I'm hoping with Tony Kanaan staying and deciding to go out the way that is deserving, which is with quality results. That man has not forgotten how to drive. This has been so painful for him and for many of us to watch. I want to see them come good next year, as good as they can. This just, Simon, cannot be the same old conversation we have every year. Like Marco Andretti, what's it going to take? At some point in time, man, you got to change the channel. Let's see. Richard Parsons, got a question for you, Marshall. I noticed on the TV broadcast from Pocono, a small fin on the upper side pod surface of the cars. I've never noticed this before. What is it for? Is it a sensor, some kind of air device? And it's just a photo of an aerial antenna, not the little straight up kind of rod type, but actually the little blade type. So, yeah, that's all it is. Nothing more than communicating information. Brian McKay, once again, you sent in a whole bunch of questions, and I'm choosing one, and I believe it's left over from last week. Who sits besides Mike Hull wearing coveralls and a balaclava? An engineer or strategist who is suited up to be ready to substitute for any ill or injured pit crew member? That is Kate Gundlach, assistant engineer, working alongside our friend Pushy Loose, a.k.a. Chris Simmons. I believe during the pit stops, Kate works the dead man, allowing the fuel to flow from the refueling tank into the car. Therefore, since she is connected to the refueling portion of the car, even if it's on the cold side of pit lane, she is indeed suited up, helmet. I'm not sure about helmet, but at least balaclava. It's just my own memory. So that's the awesome Kate doing that, Brian. We're going to go to Nathan Koch, who says, Marshall, with the merger of spam, thank you for using spam. I highly encourage everyone to just use spam going forward. I know I'm going to get a text or something from McLaren's awesome PR guy, Tim Bampton, or maybe Zach saying, come on, dude, would you cut it off? You know me. I'm not going to cut it off. Marshall, since the merger was spam, since they will only be a 2-car team, what happens to the 2 existing chassis from McLaren? Do they get sold off to extra teams, become extra spare cars? No, Nathan, actually, they said they would just be merging all of their equipment with Arrow SPM. So this is going into the grand inventory. So all of the chassis that SPM has that they've used, not only the 2 full-time entries, their Indy 500, call it Super Speedway, we just polish on them all year and love them cars, plus the 3rd chassis that they tend to roll out for the 500. Now we're adding the 2 McLaren purchases as well. I've said this the last 2 podcasts, I think. So I'm either A, repeating myself, or B, you're hearing this for the first time if you didn't hear those. If McLaren did not have long-term plans here, it would be a really weird thing for them to combine all their equipment with Arrow SPM. So, not making any grand statements here, but I am saying that when McLaren says, and we're bringing our chassis and all the stuff we've bought, and we're going to put this into one big pool of spam, you can take that to mean they have bigger intentions in the years ahead to have a bigger presence in IndyCar and potentially with that team and potentially as more McLaren than anything else. So they're serious, very serious. And this is one of the moves that visibly demonstrates this. Brendan Long, I'm just going to answer it because you've asked, but I did answer it earlier. Could McLaren be an option to be the 3rd engine manufacturer? I've heard absolutely nothing about that, Brendan. Every time I've asked Zach Brown about it, he has said the same thing. McLaren Racing, which he is in charge of, is a completely different business under completely different management, funding, etc., than the McLaren Cars side. So McLaren coming and racing in IndyCar, they're doing that as a team. If there were a choice by McLaren Automobiles to provide engines for IndyCar, that would not be a decision that Zach made. That is not something he is in charge of. Could he influence? Absolutely. Do I think this could be a very smart thing for McLaren to ponder, knowing that North America is only growing in its importance to the brand and its sales? Yeah, it kind of could. Granted, McLaren's been a word I've known for a lot of my life. Still surprising to know how many people in North America have no idea what a McLaren is, who a McLaren was or will be. There's some pretty interesting brand lack of awareness here among the every person. Obviously, the every person cannot afford a McLaren, but there's still a lot of knowledge to be drawn. Do I think that IndyCar and the 500,000 or so people that watch its races are going to magically connect the country to the awareness of McLaren? No, but I do think there are some pretty interesting things that could be done here that only help McLaren. So while I do not know of this becoming anything, Brendan, I do believe in this instance McLaren could benefit significantly in this marketplace. Last question I'm going to answer for now, and it's because I have just been going without any concerns about time or whatever else, as I mentioned from the outset, and we're a good ways in. I'm going to answer the last question here in front of me, stop for the night, and then I'm going to review in the morning and find any stragglers that I've missed that stand out on Facebook and Twitter and throw those on and then post this. The last one here that jumps out is from Brian Ullman. It says, Marshall, apologize if this has already been discussed. And it was last week, Brian. It was the final question. But knowing this would not be the final question, I wanted to bring it up again because some might not have heard it because it's a great topic. He says, I've read a few different articles in recent weeks mentioning that General Motors was more or less ignoring hybrid technology and focusing on full electric technology. Have you heard anything about this you can share? And do you think it will have an impact on Chevy's involvement with IndyCar now that they're moving towards hybrid technology? And he also says, thanks, continue to keep you and your wife in my thoughts. Thank you, Brian. This is a big one, really a big one, because when you have Mark Royce, who is among the top 2 or 3 most influential people at General Motors, saying hybrid technology, that being adding an electric motor to a internal combustion engine and having these two work together in a hybrid capacity, we think this ship has sailed. It is old technology, and the industry is, as you mentioned, moving towards full electric vehicles. I just said that in a more definitive manner than Mark Royce did, but that's what he was alluding to. That's the reason, Brian, why I believe IndyCar did not announce they were going hybrid last year when the engine rules came out, that there was a belief that this had already passed. We can see, though, that among many other manufacturers still in the game, they're still, while looking to the future and an all-electric future, still from a current marketing and promotions and sales strategy, double embracing hybrids. It's the thing now. And you got to be able to give manufacturers, if you want them to be in your series, the thing now that they prize more than anything else. And I'll say it one more time for effect. Now. So I think there were some rightful concerns. I know that I've taken IndyCar to task many, many times about why did you not announce a hybrid back in 2018? I think there were some legitimate thoughts internally, like, okay, we could, but it sure feels like we're on the cusp of that shifting away. Again, I got to be mindful of what the manufacturers need now to get them in as manufacturers. If you're just staying internal combustion because you don't know what the future is going to be, you're just presenting yourself as truly old time and out of touch, even if it's a smart play in one sense of not committing to a technology that today might become old 2 or 3 years from now. Nonetheless, we see what they've done. They've said hybrids are going to be the way. We're bringing in electrification. This is going to be a huge part of the puzzle, Brian. IndyCar needs to be in really close huddling with General Motors on this subject. Honda has said, yay, hybrids, we're in, we're good. This is what we're absolutely putting our support behind. General Motors, at least from the top, has come out and said, we think we need to start looking beyond where we're at today, and yeah, we're not going to go nuts on ongoing hybrids. We're going to go nuts on brand new fully electric. Where I think IndyCar would do itself a big favor, since we have time, since we're talking about introducing this in 2022, spec yourself a hybrid powertrain. We know we're going to have an internal combustion engine. That's not going away. We know right now that there's going to be electrification added in. Not sure on the method of how that electricity is generated, but we know it's going to come, or how it's going to be stored. IndyCar would be smart to not bake themselves into anything that is too hard to get out of. If by, let's see, if this is coming in 22 and they've said this engine formula is going to last through 27, granted, we're currently in year 400 of the current engine formula that was only supposed to last a handful of years. But I do think with the pace of technology we expect to come, Brian, with electrification, outright 100% being the thing. IndyCar would do itself a big favor with its current manufacturers and in any discussions with new and interested manufacturers that says this is going to be the formula in terms of combustion engine for 5 years. This 2.4 liter twin turbo V6, that's going to be there. Everyone needs to accept and agree to that. Even if by 2027, internal combustion engines are seen as outmoded or outdated. Who knows? We can't really tell the future. Wouldn't be a surprise if that was a very strong sentiment by then. We also know that the way these cars are constructed, that engine is a stressed member. It's a true part of the chassis. You could remove the internal combustion engine, replace it with a full big electric battery or some sort of 100% electrified thing. Can't really say what the weight would be, what it would do to the rest of the vehicle dynamics, whether the car would understeer like a pig or whatever. There could be some changes, but just again, from a general standpoint, the motors that are being built are true. It's part of the foundation of the house. You pull that thing away, it all collapses to the ground. Could you fill something new in there to hold it all up? Yeah, you could. It's not going to be super easy, but you could. I think, Brian, what's IndyCar needs to shop, if they haven't already shopped it with Chevy and Honda, and maybe the other manufacturers are speaking with, is this. I like the idea of stability. I like the idea of a 22 through 27 stability. That's what we're going to be. That's what we're going to do. Where this gets complicated is it sure feels like the automotive industry is on the cusp of a big change. I doubt internal combustion engines are going to be classic cars and, truly old school stuff by the end of this engine formula. But I do think the numbers are going to be declining significantly. And if IndyCar is in a place where they're going to paint some rules, say that they're sticking, and that's what it is, no changes to this hybrid formula through the end of 2027, I know that looks great on paper. I know that's what manufacturers want. I know they don't want the fear of big cost changes. Teams don't want the fear of having to buy all new stuff. I totally get all that. If IndyCar were to work with its manufacturers and say, hey, we need maybe a couple of triggers that say, all right, so we've come up with this hybrid system. We've tried not to break the bank on it, make it as reasonable financially as possible. But if by 2020, the end of 24, so that would have been 3 seasons with it, if there is a new, we'll just call it eco-friendly, well, I can't even say that because, geez, the batteries and electrification stuff is no friend to the environment. It's not pumping hydrocarbons into the atmosphere, so that part's good. But regardless, if there's some next generation technology that is become industry standard or becoming industry standard, and as a group, you all and we all decide, hey, this 50 horsepower electrification KERS system, man, that thing's about as relevant as the old Ford Model T. I think there needs to be some mechanisms in place. Maybe it comes after the second year, maybe at the end of 23, where there's that hardcore sit-down appraisal. Is this going to work for us to keep using it? Or over the next year, do we develop a replacement for it? I know we come back to costs. Manufacturers are here spending money, a lot of money to do this, to promote. So, yes, while it all costs money, they are spending money to promote and sell cars. If shifting the anchor of what they're promoting, hey, we're hybrid Indy cars. If that hybrid thing is no longer in fashion, if not feeling old-timey, just like we are today with nothing other than an internal combustion engine, I think IndyCar would be wise to include within whatever agreements, supply agreements, engine supply rules, or otherwise, to say, here are some milestones every year, 2 or 3, whatever it might be, that has us sit down and collectively agree or disagree on whether we need to stay the course with the current hybrid thing, go non-hybrid, get rid of the actual electrification. We're going to use nothing but internal combustion, but we're going to use a cutting-edge fuel that produces almost zero, I'll just say, bad stuff for the environment. It's a, quote, clean-ish fuel. That's something that's floated around as a possibility. Well, if that's the thing, that sure would be a big thing to promote. Hey, the internal combustion engine, there's no need for it to die because we've come up with a fuel that isn't a fossil fuel that killing the ozone layer. You know, building something, Brian, into the rules, into contracts and agreements, based on Mark Royce's sending a shot across the bow, not to IndyCar. I mean, of course, trust me, someone that important isn't making a statement like this to send a message to IndyCar. He'd just pick up the phone and say, hey, Jay Fry, guess what? All right, we'll be there for a very brief amount of time because we're with you, but we're not going to be there for 5 or 6 years with a damn hybrid. IndyCar needs to build some flexibility into its regulations with its manufacturers that allows them to review and possibly alter what the manufacturers and possibly the series view as the most important technological advancement to promote with the series. And if it continues being hybrid, they'll stay hybrid. If Chevy and Honda say, yeah, that was cool for a year or two, we're going to yank that out. Here's this new thing. IndyCar being proactive instead of reactive, I think that's the right way to go, Brian. I really do. It's hard. It's not simple. We love simplicity. 5-rule plan, 5-year plan, 6-year plan. Nothing's changing. Bank on it. It's great. Not if the automotive industry that you are courting and that you have participating in your series is in the midst of a technological revolution, and we don't know exactly what the revolution is going to be at this point. So that's where I hope they take things. It's 9:44 on a Tuesday evening. I'm going to go have dinner. Gotten to a lot of your questions. I'm going to try and get to a few more here in the morning. The pitch of my voice will probably be different because I'm thirsty and hoarse right now, and who knows what it'll be in the morning. Nonetheless, I'll be back to you here shortly with some more questions on the good old Marshall Pruett podcast. Yeah, I said my name again. That's weird. Our Week in IndyCar episode. I think only the second time ever in 3 years where I've broken out Q&A into a separate thing, but that's because you all have sent in so many questions, and I've tried to consolidate, on the Pocono thing. I probably rolled 30 or 40 questions on different themes and strands into the little opening thing. So I haven't done a count of how many exactly I've gotten through, but I think I've gotten through a lot. Spend some time getting through a few more, and we'll look forward to speaking to you again in the morning and wrapping this up. All righty then. And we are continuing now with a little bit of sleep. Let's go to James Bethay, who says, the 4 people I took to the race at Pocono, we had a great time and I want to go back. That's the best part of the weekend for me. I'm torn a lot on the arguments out there about the track. He says, I loved it while I was there and I want to come back. He says, if not, I'll drag people down to Richmond. Yeah, again, James, Sunday certainly did not help in any kind of coming together again between IndyCar and the track to pen a new contract agreement to keep returning there. Not saying that lap 1 crash was some sort of catalyst, but I think the odds were fairly slim going in. There was going to need to be a very strong crowd, very strong everything, and while the crowd looked better to my untrained eyes via television, and while I did have some folks in the grandstands reach out on social media and say, hey, it's stronger than I recall seeing when I was here last year. I mean, there seemed to be some positives there. I just don't know if is this going to be yet another stain on the series reputationally, crashes and all the kind of nonsense, talking about fencing and whatnot. Here's just another quick thought. So the Daytona 500, I watch it every year. Usually do like a lot of folks do in IndyCar and sports cars, and that's tune in for the final, 10 laps, 20 laps, who knows, towards the end. Want to see who wins this really big race. What that event has become, though, which is really bizarre, is the thing that I hope Pocono does not become if it continues, and that is the expectation for the big one, if not multiple big ones. And I know we could say that about many of the big tracks NASCAR goes to that are, quote, restrictor plate style events. We know that there's going to be big multi-car crashes. It's known going in. It's almost, it's part of every promotional package shown on television leading up to the race. Giant crashes. It's just become an accepted thing. And I believe the reason it is accepted is the safety of the cars. Is at such a high state, and intrusion into the grandstands is such a rarity that you can just have this giant ball of crashes multiple times per Daytona 500, and it's just accepted as part of the entertainment. The cars being very heavy, fully enclosed drivers in steel cages, and you name it. It makes these crashes, quote, entertaining, knowing that, again, by and large, drivers are not going to be injured. And fans, I believe, can feel safe that they're not going to be injured. Therefore, it's just visual insanity. That's my concern for IndyCar continuing at Pocono, is that we would just start to expect the big ones. I don't need to repeat everything over again, but obviously our drivers are not encased in big steel cages. And while there are not fans where these crashes have taken place, the things that the drivers are hitting to keep them from going into the countryside do a lot of damage. So, yeah. If IndyCar were to return, James, and if my sensibilities were to be applied to that contract, which I doubt they would, there would be a lot of things included, a lot of provisions that said, we need to do everything possible so that this does not become IndyCar's annual Daytona 500, where flying cars, drivers, and chassis being beaten up, torn apart, and otherwise in the catch fencing. That never happens again. So we'll see. See, where else can we go here? I'm on Twitter. I'm going to switch over to Facebook to close a couple of the final questions you sent in there. This one I really like. This is from Joey of the Priuses, and thank you for sending this. He says, does the road to Indy actually need ovals? He says, the star rookies on the ovals this year, Ferrucci, Ericsson, maybe even Hanley, that have come from a non-oval background, while guys who came from lights, Herta, Rosenquist, and whatnot, have struggled more. I wouldn't say struggle in terms of ovals with Herta and Rosenquist. I would just say that, they might not have grasped everything at times. We've seen Colton, though. Texas, for example, man, he was a rocket there. And Felix certainly is gaining more feeling. I do like where you're going here, Mr. Priuses. If we're looking at ways to reduce costs, and knowing that for what we've seen with many true oval rookies coming into IndyCar in the last couple of years, I think there might be something to this. Would I prefer young drivers to get oval experience before they get to IndyCar? Absolutely. If, though, based on what you have mentioned here and what I think we would just have to look back and say, yeah, that's actually, there might be a lot of merit here to consider. I think there's really something here. I truly do. Jordan King's another one who, did, while he had a really good partial season with Ed Carpenter Racing last year, didn't know a thing about ovals, did his very first oval this year being the Indy 500. That was super impressive. I think you're onto something here. And I think if I am Anderson Promotions and I'm looking at ways specifically on the Indy Lights front to trim budgets, I know the Indy Lights series is not a super oval series. It's not one where we just see them constantly pounding around on ovals. So again, I'm not saying this is something that could be a giant cost savings, but would definitely lean towards your thought process here. And just quickly, looking at the schedule this year, the Freedom 100's the granddaddy of all Indy Lights events due to where it's held. After that, obviously, we have Gateway as the, quote, other oval. I know that there's some other fun stuff that takes place on a smaller oval with the lower categories, but I do think there could be something here. I mean, is the Freedom 100 the thing that gets anyone, quote, hired coming out of Indy Lights? No, not today. It's Champion with that $1 million advancement prize and or someone with their own budget. So I think there could be something here. I don't know how much of a budget reduction it would be, and I realize that we are, talking about not a lot of ovals to try and take off of the list, but still, could that be something where a calendar consolidation, you can take, I don't know, a couple $100,000 off an annual budget, $200,000, whatever it is, it's going to help. It's absolutely going to help. So I love the idea here and absolutely think that this needs to be considered as a possible direction to go. All right. Take a couple more here, maybe. Quick gander. Silviu says, hello from Romania. Well, hello from California. Is Pocono more dangerous than Indianapolis? Says turn 2 is similar with Indianapolis's turns. Keep up the good work and best wishes for you and your wife. Always a hard one to answer definitively, Silviu. I mean, if we take the death and maiming toll at Indianapolis, just because it's been used for so long, it's certainly going to be a lot higher. The possibility for big, scary crashes, just the same at Indy, just seems like we are repeating things a bit at Pocono that experience should be preventing or keeping us a little bit more in check. Let's see. Chris, who's at Boston IndyCar, Twitter handle is going to be awesome forever. He says, I feel like there's a lot to unravel about this track after the past few years. I think you might be onto something here, Chris, seeing as how we're end of almost 3 hours of conversation based on Q&A and a little bit of riffing up front by me. Chris D'Amato, going back to what Craig Hampson brought up last week, is it safe to say that the costs of a chassis have effectively killed any chance of multiple manufacturers or other circumstances? I remember when you'd have good battles between Lolas, Renards, Swifts, and such in the kart days. I would say yes, Chris. Sadly, the days of multiple IndyCar chassis suppliers is relegated to history. And the reason primarily would be cost. Not the super high cost, but the fact that you can guarantee IndyCar will squeeze Dallara to produce the lowest cost chassis possible, and only a very large, call them almost institutional organization like Dallara could actually do that and eke out some sort of small profit. If we are going to any one of the somewhat few remaining commercial open-wheel chassis suppliers, again, I think you're going to have a much bigger challenge, just simply unable to hit that price point. So, yeah, I think just time and practicality and the loss of Renards and Lolas and Swifts. Yeah, if Dallara is not the lone chassis supplier to IndyCar for the rest of my life, I will be very, very surprised. Let's see, what else? At Tony Kanon's Nose. I'm just telling you, I say this every week. I love people's social media handles. It's the best. Marshall, is there any reason to look into at Styled Athletic having Braden Eves gear with Meyershank Racing logos? I think so. I'm clueless about it. I have poked my head into the Styled Athletic tent once or twice, seen some pretty cool stuff there. I know that my friends at Dinner with Racers work with Styled Athletic for their swag and whatnot. So haven't seen this one because I haven't been to a racetrack. I know I was at Monterey last weekend, but that wasn't a, quote, racetrack visit. That's going to a vintage event. So I don't know. That's very observative. So I'll have to reach out to good old Mr. Shank and see what's the deal, man. Len R. throws in something here that could be just a little interesting. We didn't get into this in my conversation with Santino. He says, is Santino planning to stay with Dale Coyne Racing? What role does Sebastian returning, if any, to DCR play in his decision to return to DCR? So while Santino said he would like to return and would like to continue working with Seb, the one thing that is interesting is did a story, I don't know, 10 days, 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, with Santino about him having options, him exploring options. There was certainly a negative that came from that, which I think was unanticipated. And that was most people who might be interested in driving an IndyCar and or driving for Dale Coyne, most people were under the absolute belief that that seat was taken, signed, sealed, and delivered to one S. Ferrucci. His revelation that it was not, I have since heard, has led to Dale's phone exploding with people who are interested. So I don't know where he is going to end up, Len, whether it is staying or going elsewhere. As he did mention, he does have more opportunities than he expected. I don't know if Dale Coyne Racing is one of them simply because of the amount of interest that he has drawn by letting folks know that he is not indeed signed to return yet. So we will have to, as my Week in Sports Cars co-host Graham Goodwin is fond of saying, wait and see. Okay, going to just scroll through here quickly and see if and what might be left on the good old tweeters. Got a couple people who've asked, where can we get more Santino Ferrucci merchandise? I am extra clueless. We did not get into that. You might just ping him on the good old social medias, and hopefully he will respond. All right, so we're done with Twitter. Let's roll back over to Facebook and try and pick through any. We're up to 109 here. Pick through any that I might have missed. All right. Hey, here's a fun one. Rupert Giles says, so Marshall, what's the difference between a wicker, a gurney flap, and a Hanford device? Awesome question. The first two are the same thing, different names. Gurney flap is the little 90-degree angled piece that usually gets mounted on top of a wing element, although sometimes, very rare times, but sometimes they have been mounted on the bottom side of a wing, usually rear wing, but a wicker or a gurney, it's the same thing, just different naming conventions. Hanford device, a very specific thing, and that was a rather tall, actually very similar, if not identical, to a gurney flap or wicker, just a super, super tall one mounted beneath the rear wings of kart IndyCars in the 1990s, the latter half, I think, off the top of my head, 95, 96 or so, maybe a little bit later, was when they debuted on super speedways, and it was to help promote passing. And boy, did they create a giant wake, a huge opening behind the cars for people to use for drafting purposes. So cartoonishly big, Rupert, to the point to where if you think of looking at the back of an Indy car in super speedway form, very thin, tend to be small rear wing. You look at that from behind, and the rear wing, while you can see it, it's, again, very tiny aspect ratio compared to everything else you see on the car. Hanford device mounted to the rear wing at the trailing edge at the back of it with this large, effective plate extending down, was so big that teams would put sponsor logos on it. So that's how tall the things were, extending downward from the base of the rear wing, basically the trailing edge of the rear wing. And it just managed to trip up all kinds of air flowing over it and punch a giant hole behind the cars. So that's what the Hanford device did, and allowed genuinely cartoonish passing. It's just absurd. Wicker and gurney being mounted on top of the wing will both increase downforce, but also increase efficiency, reduce drag by pulling the airstream up as it trips over the top of the flap. The Hanford device did the same thing inverted upside down at the bottom side of the wing, but had nothing to do with downforce or efficiency. It was meant to ruin those things, all in the name of passing. Let's go to Dean Ackerman again. Says, late one. All these questions and nobody showcased their outrage that the LED number panels have disappeared again. All the cars at Pocono had number decals on the roll hoops. Are the panels once again retired for 2019? He says, personally, all right, there's a foul here, Dean. If you're going to use the word personally in the Marshall Pruett podcast, it has to be hashtag me personally. I mean, come on. You should know this by now. Personally, I like the clean look of the numbers, or allow NTT to have larger series decals in the location to sell their branding and investment in the series. Just a little secret here. I stopped looking or caring a little while ago. So I genuinely have been relying on you all to tell me when the panels have or haven't been working, because I give up. I don't care. I like them, like y'all. I like them. I just tracking the are they, aren't they, will they, won't they work thing. Yeah, it makes my brain hurt. So, but yeah, clearly seeing that they have just gone back to applying stickers and getting them off the cars altogether. Maybe I need to drop Jay Fry yet at my 27th call or email over the past couple of years on the topic of number panels and are they returning again? Because seriously, it's one of the most read things I post on Racer. It's hilarious. When I send in a LED story, I could send in breaking news about this. I could write a super in-depth opinion piece or analysis item. Man, 200 words on the stupid LED panels is going to kick the living poop out of whatever, like, real work, real stories that I might file, which I just find endlessly amusing. So, yeah, I guess I need to reach out to Jay again and find out what is or isn't going on. Let's see. Go to Kyle Ballard. Says, Colton Herta's crash had me thinking on the side. On the inside of racetracks, why don't racetracks have gaps for safety vehicles immediately before and after corners, rather than gaps in the middle of the straightaway where race cars are more prone to crash? Well, I would just say here, Kyle, I wouldn't use Colton's crash in the example that you saw at Pocono as a blanket statement. So just say that, yeah, if you take a look at every track, they're not necessarily laid out the same, nor is this topic in question applied identically everywhere. Jace Mishner, thanks for sending this in, Jace, says, why does IndyCar not have a rain compound tire? It is made for some really fun races in F1, and is always touted as the equipment equalizer. I realize that a speedway may be unsafe, but a road or street course should be doable, and asked for my thoughts. And the answer to that is they do, and have had rain tires for decades upon decades. So, yes, not something that is used or would ever be used on an oval. Although we did try that for a little bit back in the day at Loudon, and did generate willpower flipping the double bird to race control, I believe. And I think we have a question here somewhere, and I'll just answer it now. Someone was asking about why did willpower after winning flip off a fan? At least as it looked like to me, the fan who was near the media center as Will was walking towards it to go in and do his post-race press conference, it looked like the fan asked him to flip him off because there was like smiles and happiness going on, and Will, being Will, gave the guy, flipped the bird to the guy who was holding his phone up right in front of Will. So yeah, it didn't look like Will just decided to flip off someone. It looked like someone said, "Hey man, give me the bird," and took a fun. That guy, whomever that is, if you're listening or if you know that person, I think he has a really awesome photo. If not some sort of screensaver or something to use here. A new avatar of willpower giving him the bird. But yeah, Jace, they do have rain tires, and there you go. But yeah, wouldn't use them on ovals because we would have whatever we think that was bad that happened on lap 1 in terms of a crash. Yeah, that would be there would be no cars left in a very short amount of time. Let's see. Mike Markham. Interesting one. Says, Marshall, love the podcast. Thanks. I love it too. Do you think it was a bad idea for Hinch to come out and start pushing for a position with McLaren and seemingly brushing Honda aside right off the bat? McLaren is new, but Honda has been loyal to him. He may end up needing Honda if McLaren goes in a different direction. I'll recap a little bit on what I mentioned last week, Mike. And again, I know that for those of you who are faithful listeners, I apologize for repeating something. I'm also always cognizant that sometimes someone like Mike, who I'm not sure if I've seen file in a question before, might be listening for the first time, or there could be others. So here's how I see it and what I understand, Mike. Hinch, while having really strong relationship with Honda Canada that supports him, and having a very strong relationship with Honda USA where he does commercials for them on a personal services level, and having a very awesome and cheery relationship with Honda Performance Development, I do not believe, in terms of coming out of pocket, that here in the USA there has been any effort to try and either, I don't want to say keep Hinch, but assist Hinch in finding a quality Honda-based ride. That might sound weird. Isn't he the most popular IndyCar driver? Isn't he the biggest face in terms of recognition because of these commercials? Aren't those commercials with Honda? Yes, absolutely. Where money can be spent and favor can possibly be given on the Honda side is through the racing efforts, through HPD. And they've identified 2 or 3 drivers that are core, absolutely core to them, the present and future. As I understand it, we have Scott Dixon, Alexander Rossi, Colton Herta. Those 3 are really viewed as, quote, Honda drivers. Honda plays an important part in their participation in IndyCar, possibly on a personal level, contractually, financially, etc. Honda has identified a few drivers and said, those are our drivers. We love all of you, but there's a couple that are ours. To my understanding, Hinch is not one of those drivers. And I'm talking the racing side exclusively. As I see things and understand things and interpret things, Mike, there is very strong effort going on privately for Hinch to look around and see what opportunities he has among Honda-powered teams to race with them. And that would then allow the continuation of whatever financial agreements are in place between himself and Honda Canada, Honda USA, on the TV and personal side. that would all be, I think, the tidiest and best for him. I interpret the message that was sent out on social media as one being a message to Honda. Hey, I'd be more than happy to represent Chevrolet as I once did. Half of Hinch's IndyCar wins are with a Chevrolet behind him. I'll be happy to represent him if you don't want me. That's how I received it. I'm not saying that's what it is. I'm just saying that's how I received it. Hey, guess what? I'm absolutely ready to go back to Chevy if you all aren't interested in keeping me. So there's that. Would also say, Mike, that there's a possibility based on the IndyCar market and what's available in terms of seats at Honda teams that Hinch might really need to stay at Spam next year, knowing that he has 1 year left on his contract, because I'm not sure market-wise there's going to be enough or what he would want in terms of seats and quality available to move towards. So don't hold me to that 100%. Obviously, I'm hoping that everything works out beautifully for James. What he does for IndyCar and brings to IndyCar is amazing. The timing of this, though, is just something that could be a little, I'll just say, non-complimentary. This is not, the timing is not optimal on this at all. So if James ends up staying at McLaren, I would say that it's because that was the best thing he could find. But don't underestimate the fact that there's a grand desire for Honda to help make that shift to a high-quality team like a Rahal Letterman Lanigan, maybe even a Dale Coyne Racing, make that possible. All right, I'm going to take a quick little scroll through here on Facebook, and see if there's anything else left for us to get to, and if not... Kevin Frederico says, "Hey Marshall, hope you and Chabrel are holding strong." Thank you, Kevin. It's been interesting, man. We're when we do decide to talk about our most recent journey, it might be an interesting little listen. Can never really say whether it will be interesting, but at least in my head, I can tell you it's been interesting to experience. All right. I think we might be getting close to the end here. Let's go to Christopher Logan. I was thinking about you guys after you brought up Pato Award last week. Do you think Red Bull would consider jumping back into IndyCar? Obviously, with the deal for Pato, Red Bull pays attention to IndyCar. Red Bull sponsors everything from F1 to mattress races and soapbox derbies. Wouldn't IndyCar be appealing to sponsors or potential teams that have no problem spending 10 times what an IndyCar budget is to not even be really competitive in F1? I guess this is more of a rambling question. Just seems that IndyCar is on the rise and could potentially be attractive to those already entrenched in motorsport. Get this almost weekly, Christopher. Maybe the angle that I haven't added so far and why I wanted to pick this one up is if IndyCar wanted to be an IndyCar, good Lord. I can't even use the excuse that it's late and I'm tired. Just maybe I haven't had enough coffee. If Red Bull wanted to be an IndyCar, they would be an IndyCar. They are not. Another key thing to know, Jay Fry, president of IndyCar, prior to that, and I guess he still kind of has that title, director, head of competition, been there for many years now. His last really big thing in the sport before coming to IndyCar was the Red Bull NASCAR team that he ran. He is as close to Dieter Mateschitz and Christian Horner and Helmut Marko. I mean, truly, pick up the phone, talk to the man who owns Red Bull, the man who runs everything Red Bull does in racing, the guy who runs the Formula One team. Jay is super tight, truly super tight with everyone. So in terms of access and availability, hey, what would it take to get you guys to come over and race here again? That option exists, has existed all along, Christopher, and I'm sure at some point in time that question's been asked. So of all the series where Red Bull could be enticed to come and compete in North America, IndyCar, I would say, is number one due to the long-standing and super close relationship between the man who runs IndyCar and all the people in charge at Red Bull. And yet there is no team. So beyond Pato, beyond IndyCar being on the rise and so on, if Jay Fry's presence and or suggestions have not compelled Red Bull to come and put money behind a team or start their own, as we once had, I would say we just need to take that on its face value. For whatever reason, they don't see the value. I don't know if there's a true need. I mean, I think folks, when they think of Red Bull, they definitely know what it is, well aware that it's been the probably biggest, if not most well-known energy drink. I don't know how much market penetration would actually be done by competing in IndyCar. I think they got it. So, long story short, Christopher, the guy who could make it happen better than anyone else, I'm sure has asked, has tried, hasn't happened, and I just need to accept that for what it is. All right, I'm scrolling down towards the end of the 108 items posted on Facebook. Is there anything else we need to get to here, or do I say farewell? All right, we're going to go with two. Going to go with Jordan Darwin. Thank you, Jordan, for always sending in something cool. He says, MP, there's a report that Colton Herta has seen between 3 and 10 contract offers. This is way too big a range for me to feel like the source is reliable. Do you have any feel on the actual number? 2 to 4, 5 to 7, 8 to 10? I don't. You said the source is omitted on where this came from. Okay, I haven't seen whomever wrote that. I don't want to disparage them. How's this? If there's a report saying he's seen between 3 and 10, I mean, that's like saying I weigh between 100 and 1,000 pounds. I am between 4 feet and 12 feet tall. Yeah. If you're throwing out 3 to 10, I'm just saying that's not a actual report. That's just having no clue. So I guess I am disparaging whomever wrote that, and hopefully they'll reach out to me and tell me to go to hell. I would say somewhere off the top of my head, I'd say 5. I know of a couple of IndyCar teams that are very interested, have been very interested. I know that there has been a little bit of outreach from Formula One possibilities. Can't say if that's actual contract offer compared to inquiry. I would say 5-ish is a pretty good number. It might be higher. I'm guessing. Granted, I'm actually counting the ones that I know of because I've spoken with people who have said we are interested in talking to, or know of the fact that such things have taken place. So I would say somewhere in the 5 range. Could be a little bit higher, but yeah. I mean, if you're going to paint a picture here, saying 3 to 10 is just kind of, yeah. Let's close. We're going to close with Bob Rundgren. Says, don't you think it's time for Marco Andretti to hang it up? I mean, come on. He's on one of the top 3 teams, and he gets beaten by Foyt Racing at Pocono. He's driving scared. He was pathetic at Indy and Iowa, and is embarrassing the Andretti name. Don't get me wrong, nothing would be better for the series than to see him winning and fighting for the championship, but what a disappointment. I've riffed on this recently, and don't want to just do that again. So that part of the, do I think it's time for Marco to hang it up, Bob? I don't feel a need to really cover that ground again. Yes, I agree. I think it is time for Marco to either retire or do all that he can to drive for another team. The definition of insanity has been defined over and over and over again with Marco in recent years. It is the same thing with seemingly worsening results. So, unless there is such a profit to be received by continuing to drive, I can't see why he would want to continue, knowing that he is developing a real estate, or has and continues to do a lot of, let's just say, other things in business that should sustain him financially. Knowing that he also is a owner of the car that he drives, one of many involved in the ownership of that. But nonetheless, if you aren't having fun, if you aren't achieving your minimum goals of competitiveness, yeah, I think you should. I think any driver, any athlete should. The guy that was putting up 27 points a game in the NBA and is now on the bench and clocking 17 minutes and 8 points. You know, if you need to, and the contract's big enough, I guess you can do that for a little while, but there does, I would hopefully come a point where you go, yeah, all right, well, there's no upward trend awaiting me here. It's been downward. I'm staring here at Marco's season. He has 2 sixths, good, 2 tenths, and everything else is some form of didn't even know you were there. 13th, 14th, 13th, 13th, 26th, 16th, 23rd, 21st, 15th, and 15th. Where this is a little bit frustrating, and where I want to just take this as the last question and shape this in a slightly, I don't know, maybe different angle than we've gone before, Bob, is that if you look at what Marco is capable of versus what he is achieving, it's clear that this experiment needs to end. I don't agree that him succeeding would be the best, would be a wonderful big thing for the series. I just don't. I think that enough time has gone on that the window of a next generation Andretti resonating with the public. I mean, he's been driving Indy cars for a really long time. I mean, how's this? We're just about to conclude the 2019 IndyCar series. His first season was 2006. 2006. And I love Marco as a person. I truly do. So none of this is, I'm not on the can't stand Andretti bandwagon. Not at all. I mean, I genuinely enjoy him as a human being. I've also, having seen him race, I think the first time was on the Pro Mazda level, in person at least. The guy's got a lot of talent. How's this? Marco came into the IndyCar series during a year where, I'm just going to rattle off some names. Roberto Moreno competed. Buddy Lazier was a full-time guy. Sarah Fisher was still driving. Colton Herta's dad was still in IndyCar. AJ Foyt, the 4th or 5th or whatever number, was in the series. Kosuke Matsura competing in the series. Adrian Fernandez's team was still in the series. Felipe Giafoni and Jeff Bucknam were the 2 AJ Foyt racing drivers. Jeff Simmons, brother of Pushy Loose Chris Simmons, was competing in the series. Eddie Cheever was racing. Tomas Enga was there. I mean, Tiago Medeiros, Marty Roth, Larry Foyt competed that season. PJ Chesson, Stefan Gregoire. I mean, I'm just saying here. That's how long Marco has been in the series. And we're looking at, since 2012. He had an amazing season in 2013. The entire Andretti team had an amazing season in 2013. But since 2012, he's finished in the championship. If we exclude that 5th place in 2013, that was his absolute career's best. Since 2012, this new era, if we want to call it that, new chassis, new motor, formula, 16th, 5th, amazing, but then 9th, 16th, 12th. Last year he rallied with a 9th. It's good. And we're currently at 16th again. Just saying, if he returns, it's because there are commercial reasons, and there's no real, I just can't imagine how believing coming back for season whatever number it's going to be is going to be any different than the others. So the thing that is maybe new here is I keep hearing that there might be some big stuff. There might be some changes coming. Can't say what because I don't know what, genuinely. But I've heard that there could be something coming, Bob. So I have an idea. Not ready to put it in print or say it yet. I have an idea. But nonetheless, I think I would love for Marco, just as I am hoping for Tony Kanaan, I'd love for them to have one more really good run. Knowing that Marco's only had one really good run, and Tony obviously has had many, including a IndyCar championship, I'd love to see Marco go out on some form of high. It's not going to happen at his own team. Culturally, there needs to be a complete change. Not because there's anything wrong with Andretti Autosport. Just if he is going to find something different within himself, it would need to happen at a Ray Hall Letterman Lanigan, at a Dale Coyne Racing, at a, heck, name any other team. Chip Ganassi Racing, Arrow Schmidt Peterson, which I can't wait to call spam formally once that gets rolling here. There are many options among teams that are quality teams that I would love to see Marco spend at least a year with, just to see if that thing that got him to 5th in 2013 could be found again. And if not, honestly, I'd feel bad for him, because going into retirement, ending what will end up being probably the longest single career of his life, knowing that he'll be doing other things after racing, but this will probably stand as the most enduring thing he's done in his life, will be looked back upon as so much less than it could have been. I'd hope for his sake that he finds something to do with someone somewhere else in the series to give it a shot. And I'll see if what I'm hearing might suggest that is going to be a reality. All right, my friends, this is all I got. With some of the overnight questions that came into, I think we're at somewhere in the 170-ish questions and comments. I've done my best here in about a little over 3 hours, 3.5 hours. And yeah, I don't think I can do this every week, but knowing that there's such a big reaction coming out of Pocono and that so many of you took the time, many of you for the first time, wanted to make sure that I honored your efforts and your interest by matching that with trying to get through just about every single one, if not directly by naming you and calling out the question you wrote, at least the subject you sent in, which, as often happens with big happenings like we had at Pocono, a lot of people send in similar things, so they kind of get rolled up into 5, 10, 15, 20 questions might get rolled up into one answer. So thank you nonetheless for sending everything in. We're doing the TorontoMotorsports.com giveaway yet again. So put them likes on the question you like the most, or get folks to put some likes and upvotes on the one you sent in, and we will see who has the biggest number next week and who wins the good old prize of t-shirt, koozie, stickers, whatever package you want from our pals at TorontoMotorsports.com. Thank you massively to Cooper Tires, also the Justice Brothers, who they are indeed like brothers and sisters to me, and also to Bell Racing Helmets USA. They're all brothers and sisters. That's the really cool thing about those who support my shows. They aren't, quote, advertisers. They are family members. They are brothers and sisters, and they just want us to succeed and have fun and make good content. So hopefully we've ticked some of those boxes, maybe at least one, I hope, this week. With all that said, I am Marshall Pruett. This is the Marshall Pruett Podcast in our Week in IndyCar episode, Q&A special, and I'll speak to you next week.